Yo, what's up? Welcome to Potter Vibes, where stories come alive. Buckle up because today we have Molly Weasley brought the entire Weasley family to Privet Drive at midnight with Auror Escort, and the Dursleys never saw morning. Quick favor, if you dig this content, drop a like and subscribe. It takes just a second but means so much to us. Let's roll. Chapter 1, The silence. The night air hung heavy over the Burrow, unusually still for early July. Inside the crooked, magical home, Molly Weasley stood at her kitchen window, peering into the darkness for what felt like the 100th time that evening. Her fingers worried at the edge of her apron, twisting the worn fabric as anxiety crawled up her spine. Still nothing. Arthur's voice came softly from behind her. Molly shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. 5 days without word from Harry. 5 days of growing dread that coiled in her stomach like a snake. "I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation," Arthur said, though the reassurance rang hollow even to his own ears. He placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. "Perhaps the Muggles have restricted his owl post again." "It's more than that, Arthur." Molly turned from the window, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Harry promised to write every 3 days. He knows we worry, especially after what happened at the tournament. He wouldn't just stop writing. The Triwizard Tournament. Cedric's death. You know whose return." The memory of Harry, clutching Cedric's lifeless body, haunted them all. The boy had witnessed horrors no child should ever see. "And Ron says Hedwig hasn't returned either. That's not like her." Molly moved to the stove, waving her wand to heat the kettle. Tea wouldn't solve anything, but the familiar ritual gave her hands something to do. "Something's wrong, Arthur. I can feel it." Before Arthur could respond, a frantic tapping at the window made them both jump. Molly rushed to open it, and a familiar snowy owl tumbled inside, landing awkwardly on the kitchen table. "Hedwig!" Molly gasped, immediately noting the awkward angle of the owl's wing and the ruffled, dirty state of her usually pristine feathers. "Arthur, she's hurt." Arthur was already moving, grabbing a small box from the shelf where they kept basic medical supplies for the family owls. "Easy there, girl," he murmured, approaching carefully. Hedwig's amber eyes were wide with distress, but she didn't flinch when Arthur gently examined her wing. "Is there a message?" Molly asked, searching carefully through Hedwig's feathers. "Nothing," Arthur confirmed grimly. "And her leg strap is missing entirely." "Mum? Dad?" Ron appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair sticking up in all directions from sleep. His eyes widened at the sight of the injured owl. "Hedwig. What happened to her?" "We don't know, dear," Molly said, her voice tight with concern as she helped Arthur splint the owl's wing. "She just arrived, and she's hurt." "Is there a letter from Harry?" Ron asked, fully alert now. "No," Arthur said. "No letter." Ron's freckled face paled. "That's not right. Harry wouldn't send Hedwig without a letter, and he definitely wouldn't let her get hurt like this." The kettle whistled sharply, making them all jump. Molly mechanically prepared tea, her mind racing. As she set the mugs on the table, more footsteps thundered down the stairs, and suddenly the kitchen was full of Weasleys, all in various states of dishevelment. "We heard voices," Fred said, stifling a yawn. "Bit late for a family chat, isn't it?" George added, before spotting the injured owl. "Blimey, is that Hedwig?" Ginny pushed past her brothers, her face a mask of concern. "What happened? Is Harry okay?" "We don't know," Arthur said, his voice deliberately calm. "Hedwig arrived injured, with no message." Bill, who had been staying at the Burrow since returning from Egypt to work at Gringotts, frowned thoughtfully. "That's concerning." "It's bloody terrifying, is what it is," Ron snapped. "Harry's relatives are awful to him. If something's happened, language, Ron," Molly admonished automatically, but her heart wasn't in it. Her eyes met Arthur's across the table, a silent conversation passing between them. "I think," Arthur said carefully, "we should all sit down." The kitchen chairs scraped across the floor as everyone found a seat. Even Percy, who had been keeping to himself since his argument with their father over the Ministry's denial of Voldemort's return, joined them, lingering in the doorway with an unreadable expression. "We need to talk about Harry," Arthur continued once they were all settled. "Given recent events, this silence is troubling." "Recent events?" Fred echoed. "You mean Voldemort being back?" Several people flinched at the name, but Arthur nodded gravely. "The Order has been monitoring Death Eater activity. There have been movements." "What kind of movements?" Bill asked sharply. Arthur hesitated, glancing at the younger children. Molly squared her shoulders. "They're not children anymore, Arthur. Not after what's happened. They deserve to know." Arthur sighed and nodded. "There have been sightings of known Death Eater sympathizers in Surrey. Nothing concrete enough to act on officially, but concerning nonetheless." The kitchen fell silent as the implication sank in. "Surrey. Where Harry lived." "I knew we shouldn't have let him go back there," Ron said, his fists clenched on the table. "Those muggles treat him like dirt even in normal times. And now, after everything that happened." "Dumbledore insisted the blood protection was essential," Arthur said, though his tone suggested he'd had his own reservations. "Blood protection won't help if he's wasting away in that house," Ron argued. "You didn't see him after the maze, Dad. He was broken. And now he's alone with people who hate him." Molly's teacup clattered against its saucer. "What do you mean, hate him?" Ron exchanged glances with Fred and George, a silent debate passing between them. "Ron," Molly said, her voice dangerously quiet. "What aren't you telling me?" Ron took a deep breath. "It's bad, Mum. Always has been. They've starved him, remember before second year? They had him locked up, bars on his windows. Fred, George and I had to rescue him with Dad's car." "Bars?" Molly repeated faintly. She turned to the twins. "Is this true?" Fred and George nodded solemnly. "We thought you knew," Fred said. "We mentioned the bars when we got back," George added. I thought you were exaggerating," Molly whispered, horrified. "For dramatic effect." "We weren't," Fred said grimly. "And that's not all," George continued. "Remember how skinny he always is at the start of term? How he eats like he's afraid someone will take his food away. And his clothes," Ginny spoke up softly. "They're always too big, worn out. Hand-me-downs from his cousin," he said once, "but they're not like our hand-me-downs. It's like they want him to feel worthless." Molly's face had gone very white. "Why didn't he say anything? Why didn't any of you say something?" "He's proud, Mum," Ron said. "And embarrassed, I think. And—" He hesitated. "And what?" Arthur prompted. "I don't think he believes he deserves better," Ron finished, his voice breaking slightly. It's like he thinks that's just how life is for him." A terrible silence fell over the kitchen. Molly's hands trembled as she pressed them flat against the table. "I've been so blind," she whispered. "All these years, I've sent that boy back to. It's not your fault, Molly," Arthur said gently. "Dumbledore assured us, Dumbledore is not his mother." Molly's voice rose suddenly, startling everyone. "And neither am I, more's the pity, but by Merlin, I've loved that boy like my own since the first time I saw him, lost and alone at King's Cross." She stood up, her chair scraping back. "And now he's alone again, hurting, maybe in danger, and we're sitting here drinking tea. What are you suggesting, Molly?" Arthur asked, though the look in his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. "We're going to get him, of course," Molly said firmly. "Tonight." Dumbledore said, Percy began from the doorway. "I don't care what Dumbledore said." Molly's eyes flashed dangerously. No child deserves to be treated that way. Magical protection or not, it's not worth Harry's suffering. We should have taken him years ago. I agree, Arthur said, surprising everyone, including Molly. But we need to be careful. If there are Death Eaters watching, then we'll need help, Molly said decisively. She turned to Bill. Can you contact Kingsley? He's in the Order, he'll understand. Bill nodded. I can try. What about Tonks? She's an Auror too, and she's been worried about Harry as well. Yes, both of them, Molly agreed. We'll need magical protection, and official authority wouldn't hurt either. Wait, are we really doing this? Percy asked, his face pale. Going against Dumbledore's direct orders? The Ministry wouldn't approve, Percy, Arthur said quietly, this isn't about the Ministry. This is about a boy who needs help. Percy flushed, conflict evident on his face, but he didn't leave. We'll need a plan, Bill said, shifting smoothly into his role as cursebreaker. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Agreed, Molly said. She glanced at the clock on the wall, just past 11. We'll go at midnight. That gives us less than an hour to prepare. I'll contact Kingsley and Tonks, Bill said, already moving toward the fireplace. Fred, George, Molly turned to the twins, I know you've been experimenting with those defensive joke products. Bring anything that might be useful. Instead of looking surprised at her knowledge of their secret inventions, the twins simply nodded, expressions unusually serious. Ron, Ginny, she continued, pack a bag for Harry. Clothes, essentials. And something to eat, goodness knows what those people have been feeding him. I'll prepare the car, Arthur said, a glint of determination in his usually mild eyes. We'll take the new one, it's less conspicuous than Broom's, and we can all fit. I'll prepare some medical supplies, Percy offered hesitantly. Just in case. Molly gave him a grateful nod. Thank you, Percy. As everyone dispersed to their tasks, Charlie appeared in the doorway, having just arrived via Flo from Romania for his planned summer visit. Did I miss something? He asked, taking in the flurry of activity. Perfect timing, Molly said, pulling her second eldest into a quick hug. We're rescuing Harry from those dreadful muggles. Your expertise with dangerous creatures might come in handy with his uncle. Charlie raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. I'm in. What's the plan? As Molly quickly brought him up to speed, the Burrow transformed around them from a sleepy family home to a hive of purposeful activity. In the living room, Bill spoke in hushed tones to two faces in the flue, a dark-skinned, bald wizard with a gold earring, and a young witch with spiky pink hair, both nodding seriously. Upstairs, Ron and Ginny moved with grim efficiency, packing Harry's bag with clothes, books, and a selection of Mrs. Weasley's best preserves and baked goods. Fred and George huddled in their room, sorting through a collection of inventions that, under any other circumstances, would have earned them a stern lecture from their mother. In the shed, Arthur prepared the family's new car, a second-hand Ford Anglia to replace the one lost to the Forbidden Forest, adding a few subtle magical enhancements for the night's mission. And in the kitchen, Molly Weasley stood over the injured owl, gently stroking her feathers as she stared out into the night. We're coming, Harry, she whispered. Hold on, dear. We're coming. Exactly 45 minutes later, the Weasleys gathered in the yard beside Arthur's enchanted car. The vehicle appeared ordinary from the outside, but Arthur had temporarily expanded its interior to comfortably seat 10 people. Bill arrived with Kingsley Shacklebolt and Nymphadora Tonks, both wearing civilian clothes rather than their Auror robes, but with their badges tucked discreetly in their pockets. Thank you for coming, Molly said, clasping their hands warmly. No need for thanks, Kingsley replied, his deep voice reassuring in the darkness. We've been concerned about Harry's situation ourselves. The Ministry's been deliberately obstructive about increasing his protection, Tonks added, her hair shifting from pink to a more subdued brown as she spoke. Official channels are getting us nowhere. So this is off the books, Kingsley continued. But necessary. What about Dumbledore? Arthur asked quietly. A shadow crossed Kingsley's face. He's been called away to the continent. Emergency meeting with the International Confederation. He left Minerva in charge of order matters, and she. He hesitated. She said to use our best judgment, Tonks finished with a small smile. And to remember that Dumbledore isn't always right about everything. Molly nodded firmly. Then we proceed as planned. They gathered around Arthur, who unfolded a street map of Little Whinging. Number 4, Privet Drive, he said, pointing to a neat row of identical houses. We'll park one street over to avoid drawing attention. Kingsley and Tonks will secure the perimeter and check for surveillance, magical or otherwise. Bill and Charlie, you'll cover the back of the house. Molly and I will approach from the front with Ron, Ginny, and the twins. Percy will stay with the car as our lookout. Everyone nodded, faces solemn in the wand light. What about the Muggles? Fred asked. Harry's aunt and uncle won't just hand him over. Leave them to me, Molly said, her voice deceptively calm. Something in her tone made even Fred and George exchange concerned glances. Remember, Kingsley cautioned, we want to do this quietly. In and out. No magic unless absolutely necessary, we don't need the improper use of magic office involved. And if there are Death Eaters watching? Bill asked. Kingsley's expression hardened. Then we do what we must to protect Harry and ourselves. Any questions? Arthur asked, looking around the circle. When no one spoke, he nodded once. Then let's go. Everyone in the car. They piled in, the magically expanded interior easily accommodating them all. Arthur started the engine with a tap of his wand, and the car rose silently into the air. Disillusionment charm engaged, he murmured, and the vehicle vanished from sight. As they soared through the night sky, Molly sat rigid in the passenger seat, her wand gripped tightly in her hand. Beside her, Arthur drove with unusual concentration, his normally jovial face set in grim lines. In the back seats, the Weasley children and the two Aurors prepared in their own ways. Ron repeatedly checked the bag they'd packed for Harry, as though afraid he'd forgotten something vital. Ginny sat silently, her jaw set in determination. The twins whispered to each other, occasionally adjusting mysterious objects in their pockets. Bill and Charlie discussed containment strategies in low voices, while Percy nervously polished his glasses. Kingsley and Tonks maintained a watchful silence, their experienced eyes scanning the darkness below. After what seemed like both an eternity and no time at all, Arthur began their descent toward a quiet suburban street. Little Whinging, he announced softly. Wisteria Walk. We're one street over from Privet Drive. The car touched down with barely a sound, coming to rest beneath the shadow of a large oak tree. Arthur tapped the dashboard, and the disillusionment charm lifted, revealing an ordinary-looking car parked innocuously by the curb. Remember the plan, he said as they exited the vehicle. Percy, I'll stay with the car, ready for a quick departure. Percy nodded, clearly uncomfortable but determined to do his part. Kingsley, Tonks, the two Aurors were already moving, wands drawn but held low, casting subtle detection spells as they circled the area. Bill, Charlie, the eldest Weasley sons nodded and slipped away toward the back of Privet Drive, silent as shadows. Fred, George, Ron, Ginny, with us, Molly said, already striding purposefully toward number 4, her husband at her side. As they walked, the perfect ordinariness of Privet Drive seemed almost oppressive. Identical houses lined the street, each with its meticulously maintained lawn and gleaming windows. In the moonlight, the sameness took on an eerie quality, as though they'd stepped into a world where individuality had been carefully excised. Bit creepy, isn't it? Fred murmured. No wonder Harry hates coming back here, George agreed. They reached number 4, its darkened windows giving no hint of the drama about to unfold. Kingsley and Tonks reappeared from their reconnaissance, approaching the group with cautious steps. No signs of magical surveillance, Kingsley reported in a whisper. If Death Eaters are watching, they're being extraordinarily subtle. The house has basic wards, Tonks added. Nothing we can't handle, but be careful, they'll alert someone if tampered with improperly. Bill and Charlie joined them, completing the circle. Back door has an alarm system, Bill said. Muggle, not magical. I can disable it, but the front might be easier. Molly nodded and stepped forward, raising her hand to knock. Wait, Tonks said suddenly. She pointed her wand at the door, murmuring a spell under her breath. Silencing charm, she explained at their questioning looks. So we don't wake the neighbors. Molly gave her an approving nod, then raised her hand and knocked firmly on the door. Silence. She knocked again, louder this time. After a long moment, a light flickered on upstairs. Heavy footsteps thumped across the ceiling, followed by an angry mutter that grew louder as it approached the stairs. Bloody middle of the night, who could possibly? The porch light snapped on, momentarily blinding them. The door wrenched open to reveal Vernon Dursley, massive in striped pajamas, his mustache quivering with indignation. What is the meaning of? He began bellowing, then froze as he registered the group of red-headed figures on his doorstep. His face purpled impressively. You, he spluttered. You're those freaks. Good evening, Mr. Dursley, Molly said with deceptive politeness. We've come for Harry. Vernon's small eyes bulged as he took in the assembled group, 8 Weasleys and 2 unfamiliar adults, all radiating unmistakable magical presence. He's not here, he snapped, already moving to close the door. Go away before the neighbors see you. Arthur's foot shot out, preventing the door from closing. I'm afraid we need to see Harry, he said, his voice firmer than his children had ever heard it. Now. Vernon's complexion darkened further. How dare you force your way into my home? I'll call the police. I am the police, Mr. Dursley. Kingsley stepped forward, his deep voice commanding respect as he flashed his Auror badge. Magical law enforcement. We have reason to believe a minor in your care may be in danger. Preposterous. Vernon spluttered. The boy is fine. Now leave my property at once or, Vernon. Petunia's reedy voice called from upstairs. Who is it? No one, Petunia. Vernon shouted back, sweat beading on his forehead. Go back to bed. Mr. Dursley, Molly said, her patience visibly thinning, we know Harry is here, and we know he hasn't been communicating with his friends. His owl arrived at our home injured. We are not leaving without him. Something flickered in Vernon's eyes, fear, perhaps, or calculation. He drew himself up, blocking the doorway with his considerable bulk. The boy is asleep, he said stiffly. Come back at a decent hour. Dad, Ron whispered urgently. Something's wrong. Harry's a light sleeper, always has been. He'd have heard us by now. Molly's eyes narrowed. Without warning, she drew her wand and pointed it directly at Vernon's chest. Move aside, Mr. Dursley, she said, her voice soft but carrying an edge that made even her own children stare at her in surprise. I won't ask again. Vernon's face drained of color as quickly as it had flushed. He stumbled back, stammering incoherently as Molly swept past him into the house, the others following closely behind. The pristine living room was dark, lit only by the spill of light from the hallway. Molly didn't pause, heading straight for the stairs with unerring purpose. You can't, you have no right, Vernon blubbered, trailing helplessly after them. Harry's room is up here, Ron said, taking the lead. Second door on the right. They climbed the stairs in tense silence, ignoring Vernon's continued protests. As they reached the landing, Petunia appeared in a doorway, her bony frame draped in a floral nightgown, her face contorted with outrage. What are you doing in my house? She hissed, then caught sight of Molly's raised wand and shrank back. We're here for your nephew, Kingsley answered calmly. Please stand aside, Mrs. Dursley. Ron had already reached Harry's door. He tried the handle, then turned to the others with an alarmed expression. "It's locked," he said. From the outside. A strangled noise escaped Molly's throat. She pointed her wand at the door. "Alohomora," she whispered. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. The room beyond was dark and unnaturally still. Molly lit her wand with a soft lumos, casting a gentle glow over the small bedroom. What they saw made them all freeze in horror. Harry lay motionless on the bed, his thin frame barely making an impression on the mattress. His face was deathly pale, cheekbones sharp beneath his skin. His glasses lay broken on the nightstand, and dried blood crusted one temple. Most alarming was the unnatural angle of his right arm, clearly broken and left untreated. "Harry!" Ron cried, rushing to his friend's side. Harry didn't stir. "Is he?" Ginny whispered, her voice cracking. Bill pushed forward, pressing his fingers to Harry's neck. "He's alive," he confirmed after a tense moment. "But his pulse is weak." "What happened to him?" Charlie demanded, rounding on the Dursleys who hovered in the doorway. Vernon's face had taken on a sickly grayish hue. He fell," he mumbled. "Down the stairs. Clumsy boy." "Liar," Fred snarled with uncharacteristic venom. Tonks had moved to examine Harry more closely, her Auror training evident in her methodical approach. "Multiple injuries," she reported grimly. "Dehydration, possible concussion. He needs medical attention immediately." "How long has he been like this?" Arthur asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Neither Dursley answered. "I said," Arthur repeated, stepping toward them with barely contained fury, "how long has he been like this?" 3 days, Petunia finally whispered, not meeting anyone's eyes. "The boy was difficult. Vernon disciplined him, and he fell. We thought he'd recover on his own." A terrible silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of Molly's ragged breathing as she stared at Harry's unconscious form. "You left him," she said at last, her voice barely audible. "You left an injured child locked in a room for 3 days, without medical care, without water. Now see here," Vernon began blustering, finding his courage again. "The boy is our responsibility, not yours. We'll deal with him as we see fit in our own home." What happened next occurred so quickly that even Kingsley couldn't have intervened if he'd wanted to. Molly Weasley turned, her wand flashing through the air with precision that belied her domestic reputation. A jet of blue light struck Vernon square in the chest. He froze in place, his mouth still open in mid-protest, eyes bulging in shock. "Bodybind curse," Molly explained calmly to the room at large, though no one had asked. Nonverbal variant. Quite useful when dealing with uncooperative individuals. Petunia shrieked and backed away, but found herself cornered by Charlie and Bill. "Mrs. Dursley," Bill said with cold politeness, "I suggest you remain very still and very quiet while we tend to your nephew." Tonks had already conjured a stretcher beside Harry's bed. "We need to move him carefully," she instructed. "He may have internal injuries we can't see." "Wait," Fred said suddenly. "Where's the cousin?" Harry mentioned a cousin. "Dudley's at a friend's house," Petunia said quickly, her eyes darting around as though seeking escape. "Spending the night." "Convenient," George muttered. With gentle care, Kingsley and Arthur transferred Harry onto the stretcher, while Tonks cast basic diagnostic charms. "His magical core is stable," she reported, "but he's severely weakened from dehydration and lack of food. The arm is definitely broken, possibly in multiple places. We'll take him straight to St. Mungo's," Kingsley decided. "I have emergency port key authorization." "His things," Ron reminded them, gesturing to Harry's school trunk. "We can't leave his wand and stuff here." "I'll get it," George offered, moving to collect Harry's possessions. "Where's Hedwig's cage?" Ginny asked, scanning the room. "In the cupboard under the stairs," Petunia said automatically, then seemed to regret speaking as all eyes turned to her. "I'll check," Fred said, heading for the door. As the others prepared Harry for transport, Molly turned to face Petunia Dursley. The thin woman flinched under her gaze. "All these years," Molly said softly, "he was your sister's son. Your blood. How could you?" Petunia's lips pressed into a bitter line. "You don't understand. You could never understand." "Then help me understand," Molly urged, genuine bewilderment in her voice. "What could a child, any child, do to deserve this?" "He's one of you," Petunia spat, a lifetime of jealousy and resentment evident in her tone. "Just like her. Special. Chosen. While the rest of us are left behind, ordinary, forgotten." Molly stared at her, comprehension slowly dawning. "You resented your sister," she realized. "And you punished her son for it." Petunia didn't deny it, her silence confirmation enough. Fred returned, carrying Hedwig's empty cage. "Found it," he said. "And you'll never believe what else I found down there." "Later, Fred," Arthur said firmly. "We need to focus on Harry now." Kingsley had produced a small silver whistle from his pocket. "Emergency port key," he explained. "Authorized for Auror use only. It'll take us directly to St. Mungo's secure arrival area." "Not all of us should go," Arthur decided quickly. "We'll draw too much attention, and we still need to deal with." He glanced at the frozen Vernon and the cowering Petunia. "I'll stay," Bill volunteered. "Charlie and I can secure the house and handle the legal aspects with Tonks." "I'll go with Harry," Ron said immediately. "Me too," Ginny added, her hand already reaching for the port key. "I'll join you," Molly said, moving to stand by Harry's stretcher. "Arthur, will you?" "I'll coordinate things here," Arthur assured her. "Fred, George, you stay with me. Percy's still with the car, we'll need transport back." "And the Dursleys?" Charlie asked, his expression suggesting he had several creative ideas about what to do with them. "Justice," Kingsley said firmly. "Magical and Muggle both. We'll make sure of it." Arthur nodded in agreement, then turned to his wife. "Go. Take care of Harry. We'll handle everything here." Molly bent to kiss him quickly, then took position beside Harry's stretcher with Ron and Ginny. Kingsley handed her the silver whistle. "On 3, he instructed. 1, 2, 3, Molly blew the whistle, and with a swirl of magic, she, Harry, Ron, Ginny, and Kingsley vanished, leaving behind the others to face the Dursleys and the reckoning to come. In the sudden quiet following their departure, the remaining Weasleys and Tonks turned their attention to the Dursleys. Vernon remained frozen by Molly's spell, his eyes the only thing capable of movement, darting frantically from person to person. Petunia had sunk down onto the landing, her back against the wall, face buried in her hands. "Right," Arthur said, his voice unnaturally calm. "Let's proceed methodically." "I'll document the scene," Tonks said, already moving back into Harry's room. "We'll need evidence for both magical and Muggle authorities." "Evidence?" Petunia's head snapped up. "What do you mean, evidence?" "Evidence of child abuse and neglect, Mrs. Dursley," Bill explained coolly. "Serious criminal offenses in both our world and yours." "You can't prove anything," she hissed, panic evident in her voice. "It's our word against his, and he's just a troubled boy with an overactive imagination." "Actually," Fred said, his usual mischief entirely absent from his face, "that's not quite true. While I was looking for Hedwig's cage, I found something else interesting." He pulled a small black notebook from his pocket. "Hidden under a loose floorboard in that cupboard under the stairs. Interesting reading. Dates, incidents, all written in Harry's handwriting." Petunia went deathly pale. "A record?" Charlie asked, reaching for the notebook. Fred nodded grimly. "Looks like Harry's been documenting things for years. Smart kid. May I?" Arthur held out his hand, and Fred passed him the notebook. Arthur flipped through it briefly, his face growing stonier with each page. "This will be helpful," he said finally, tucking it away safely. "The room itself is evidence," Tonks called from inside Harry's bedroom. "Multiple locks on the outside of the door, bars removed from the window but the brackets are still visible, minimal furnishings, signs of long-term confinement." "Don't forget this," George said, pointing to a small cat flap at the bottom of the door that none of them had noticed initially. "What's that for?" Charlie asked, kneeling to examine it. "Pushing food through," George said tightly. "Ron told us about it ages ago. After second year." Arthur's expression darkened further. "Tonks, can you take photographs? Magical and Muggle both, if possible." "Already on it," she confirmed, her camera flashing from inside the room. Bill had been examining the door frame carefully. "There's residual magic here," he noted with professional interest. "Old spells, partially broken. Containment wards, if I'm not mistaken." "Dumbledore?" Charlie suggested. Bill shook his head. "Different signature. Crude work, actually." He glanced at the frozen Vernon speculatively. "I think someone was trying to contain Harry's accidental magic. Amateur job, but potentially harmful." "Add it to the evidence list," Arthur said grimly. Petunia had begun to tremble visibly. What are you going to do to us?" she whispered. Arthur turned to her, his usual kind expression replaced by something harder. "Justice, Mrs. Dursley. As I said." "You can't, you wouldn't," she stammered. "We won't harm you," Arthur assured her, though without much warmth. "We're not like that. But you will face consequences for how you've treated Harry. The boy was placed in our care against our wishes." Petunia suddenly burst out. "We never wanted him. We never asked for this burden, this reminder of a world that took my sister and never gave her back." A heavy silence followed her outburst. "Is that what this was about?" Arthur asked quietly. "Punishment for a world you couldn't be part of? Revenge against a sister who had what you wanted?" Petunia's lips trembled, neither confirming nor denying his assessment. "And what about your husband?" Arthur continued, nodding toward the still immobilized Vernon. "What was his excuse for hurting a child?" Vernon just wanted normalcy," Petunia said weakly. "The boy was a threat to everything we built. Our reputation, our standing in the community. So appearance mattered more than a child's welfare," Arthur summarized, disgust evident in his tone. "How very normal of you." Tonks emerged from Harry's room, her camera tucked away. "Evidence secured," she reported. "Both magical records and Muggle-compatible photographs. I've also collected samples of blood from the bed sheets and fingerprints from the locks." "Excellent," Arthur nodded. "Now, we need to make some decisions about immediate next steps." "What about him?" Fred asked, jerking his thumb toward Vernon. "Can't keep him frozen forever, much as we might like to. I'll handle Mr. Dursley," Tonks said with professional detachment. "As an Auror, I'm authorized to detain individuals suspected of crimes against magical persons." "And Mrs. Dursley?" Bill asked. "The same," Tonks confirmed. "Though I think we can skip the body bind in her case, provided she cooperates." Petunia's eyes widened in alarm. "You're arresting us?" "You can't. The neighbors will see nothing unusual," Tonks assured her. "We're quite good at discretion when necessary." "And the boy? Dudley?" Charlie asked. "He'll return tomorrow to find his parents gone and Harry missing." A flicker of genuine maternal concern crossed Petunia's face for the first time. "Dudley has nothing to do with this. He's innocent." "We have no intention of punishing your son for your actions," Arthur said firmly. "Arrangements will be made for his care while this matter is resolved." "I can contact Magical Family Services," Tonks suggested. "They work with their Muggle counterparts in cases like these." "Good," Arthur nodded. Let's proceed then. One moment, George interrupted. Fred and I would like a few minutes alone with Mr. Dursley first. Petunia made a strangled noise of fear, while Arthur regarded his sons with concern. What are you planning? He asked warily. Nothing permanent, Fred assured him. Nothing illegal, George added. Just a little demonstration of the consequences of mistreating a wizard, Fred finished. Arthur hesitated, clearly torn between his sense of propriety and his own barely suppressed fury at what the Dursleys had done. 5 minutes, he decided finally. And no permanent damage. Wouldn't dream of it, the twins chorused with identical grim smiles that made Petunia shrink further against the wall. The rest of us will check the house for any other evidence, Arthur continued, deliberately turning away. Bill, would you and Charlie examine that cupboard under the stairs more thoroughly? Tonks, perhaps you could inspect the kitchen. Food deprivation seems to have been part of their methodology. As they dispersed, Fred and George approached the frozen Vernon, whose eyes bulged with terror as they pulled out their wands. Now then, Mr. Dursley, Fred began conversationally. Let's have a little chat about respecting magic, shall we? George continued. They lifted the body bind just enough to allow Vernon to speak, keeping his body immobilized. You freaks. Vernon spluttered immediately. How dare you invade my home and threaten me? I'll have the law on you. Interesting choice of words, Fred noted. Considering we are the law at the moment. And you're the criminal, George added pleasantly. Preposterous. I've done nothing wrong. The boy is a troublemaker, always has been. We took him in out of the goodness of our hearts. Funny, Fred interrupted. We didn't notice much goodness in your treatment of him. Let me tell you something, Mr. Dursley, George said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Harry Potter isn't just any wizard. He's rather important to our world. Practically a hero, in fact. And we Weasleys, Fred continued, we're rather fond of him. Consider him family, really. So when we discovered how you've been treating our honorary brother. George let the sentence hang ominously. Vernon's mustache quivered with a mixture of rage and fear. Your threats don't frighten me, he blustered, though his pallor suggested otherwise. You people can't touch me, that Dumbledore fellow said so himself. Said the boy had to stay here, that we were protected. The twins exchanged glances. Is that so? Fred asked softly. And did Dumbledore also say you could starve Harry, lock him up, and leave him injured for days? The discipline of the boy is our business. Vernon insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. You have no right to interfere in how we raise him. Discipline? George echoed incredulously. Is that what you call a broken arm and concussion? Accidents happen, Vernon muttered, not meeting their eyes. Curious how these accidents only seem to happen to Harry, Fred observed. And always behind closed doors, George added. Well, Mr. Dursley, Fred continued, rolling up his sleeves. We thought you might appreciate a demonstration of what real wizards are capable of. Since you seem so determined to fear and hate us, why not give you something concrete to base that on? Vernon's eyes widened in panic. You can't use magic against muggles. It's against your own laws. The boy told us. Ordinarily, yes, George agreed cheerfully. But there are exceptions for law enforcement purposes. And our friend Tonks downstairs is law enforcement. Besides, Fred added, we're not technically against using magic on you. Just near you. Educational purposes, you understand. With a casual flick of his wand, Fred conjured a small, wriggling creature on Vernon's shoulder. It resembled a spider, but with unnaturally long legs and far too many eyes. Vernon's scream was cut short as George quickly cast a silencing charm. That's a Madagascan venom spinner, Fred explained conversationally. Not real, of course, just an illusion. But a rather convincing one, wouldn't you say? The real ones can inject enough venom to paralyze an adult elephant. The illusory spider crawled across Vernon's shoulder toward his neck, leaving a glistening trail of imaginary venom. Of course, that's just the beginning, George continued, as Vernon's silent screams continued. Fred and I have developed quite a range of interesting products. Sweets that turn your tongue purple and make it swell to 6 times its normal size. Candies that make you vomit uncontrollably. Hats that make your head invisible. Just imagine what we could do if we really put our minds to it, Fred mused. Especially to someone who hurt our friend. Vernon's eyes rolled in terror as the illusory spider began spinning a web across his face. But we won't, George said suddenly, dispelling the illusion with a wave of his wand. Because unlike you, Mr. Dursley, we don't abuse our power over those weaker than ourselves. Fred leaned in close, his usually jovial face deadly serious. Remember this moment, though. Remember what real wizards could do to you, if we were the monsters you believe us to be. George lifted the silencing charm, allowing Vernon's ragged breathing to fill the hallway. Harry Potter will never set foot in this house again, Fred informed him quietly. And if you ever come near him again. He left the threat unfinished, but Vernon's ashen face suggested his imagination had filled in the blanks quite effectively. Our 5 minutes are up, George noted, checking his watch. Time to let the adults handle things properly. They stepped back as Arthur, Bill, and Charlie returned upstairs, followed by Tonks. None of them commented on Vernon's trembling form or the tears tracking down his purple face. We've secured all the evidence we need, Arthur reported. Tonks has prepared the official detention papers. The house is clear, Bill added. Though that cupboard. He trailed off, his expression troubled. There were signs it was used as a bedroom at some point. For years, by the look of the markings on the wall. All eyes turned to Petunia, who seemed to shrink further into herself. It was only until he got his Hogwarts letter, she whispered. We gave him Dudley's second bedroom after that. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Dursley, Mr. Dursley, Tonks finally said, her professional tone belied by the angry pink of her hair, you are being detained on suspicion of child abuse, neglect, and endangerment of a magical minor. You will be taken to a secure facility where your case will be evaluated by both magical and muggle authorities. She produced official-looking parchment and tapped it with her wand. It duplicated itself, one copy floating to each of the Dursleys. This serves as your official notice of detention, she explained. Your rights are detailed within. You may have legal representation from both magical and muggle legal systems. You can't do this, Petunia protested weakly. The neighbors, our reputation. A team of obliviators will handle the neighbors, Tonks assured her. As far as they'll know, you've taken an unexpected holiday. And Dudley? Petunia asked, genuine concern breaking through her fear. Will be cared for by your sister-in-law, Marge Dursley, until this matter is resolved, Tonks said. Unless you prefer another arrangement. Petunia shook her head mutely. Very well. Tonks produced a small wooden box from her pocket. This is a secure transport port key, authorized for prisoner transfer. It will take us directly to the detention facility. You're not coming with us? Petunia asked Arthur, sudden hope in her voice. He at least seemed somewhat reasonable compared to the others. No, Arthur said simply. I'm going to join my wife and Harry at St. Mungo's, where healers are treating the injuries your family inflicted upon him. Petunia flinched at his words. It didn't have to be this way, Arthur added quietly. All you had to do was treat him with basic decency. He turned away, unable to look at them any longer. Bill, Charlie, Fred, George, let's go. Percy's waiting with the car, and I want to get to the hospital. As his sons moved to follow him downstairs, Tonks gestured for the Dursleys to place their hands on the wooden box. Wait! Petunia cried suddenly. There's something you should know. About the boy. About why he was placed with us. Arthur paused on the stairs, looking back. What is it? Blood wards, Petunia said, the unfamiliar magical term awkward on her tongue. Dumbledore said. He said as long as Harry could call this place home, as long as he lived with me, with Lily's blood, he would be protected from him. A shadow crossed Arthur's face. We're aware of the blood protection, Mrs. Dursley. We'll deal with it. But, the protection requires that Harry consider this place home, Bill interrupted, his voice cold. After what we've seen tonight, I think it's safe to say that protection failed long ago. A prison isn't a home, Mrs. Dursley. Without another word, the Weasleys descended the stairs, leaving Tonks to complete the detention process. Outside in the cool night air, Arthur took a moment to compose himself, his sons gathered around him in concerned silence. Dad? Charlie ventured finally. Are you all right? Arthur shook his head, not in negation but as if to clear it. I've spent my entire career advocating for Muggle rights and protection, he said slowly. I've always believed that Muggles are just like us, capable of the same kindness, the same decency. And they are, I know they are. But tonight. Tonight you saw the worst of them, Bill finished quietly. Just as there are cruel wizards, there are cruel Muggles. It doesn't change who you are, Dad, George said. Or what you stand for, Fred added. Arthur managed a weak smile. Thank you, boys. Now, let's go to St. Mungo's. Your mother will be worried. As they walked toward where Percy waited with the car, Fred and George fell a few steps behind. Think those Dursleys will ever sleep soundly again? Fred murmured. Not if they have any imagination at all, George replied with grim satisfaction. Shame we couldn't do more, Fred sighed. For Harry's sake. We did enough, George said. And more importantly, they'll never hurt him again. Ahead of them, Arthur was explaining the situation to a wide-eyed Percy. And that's why they'll never see morning at Privet Drive again, he concluded as the twins caught up. Never see morning, Fred repeated thoughtfully. I like that. Has a certain finality to it. Without being excessively violent, George agreed approvingly. Sometimes, Bill said quietly, justice is better than vengeance. As they piled into the car, the lights of number 4, Privet Drive winked out behind them. By the time the first rays of dawn touched the pristine lawns of the identical houses, Vernon and Petunia Dursley were indeed gone, never to see another morning at Privet Drive again. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries hummed with the quiet efficiency of nighttime operations. In a private room on the 4th floor, Harry Potter lay unconscious in a hospital bed, surrounded by a complex array of magical monitoring charms that filled the air with soft, colorful lights. Molly sat beside him, her hand gently holding his uninjured one, while Ron and Ginny occupied chairs on the opposite side of the bed. Kingsley had left to coordinate with the others at Privet Drive, promising to return once the Dursleys were secured. He looked so small, Ginny whispered, her eyes fixed on Harry's pale face. He's always been small for his age, Ron replied, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. But yeah. I've never seen him look this fragile before. Molly said nothing, her thumb rhythmically stroking the back of Harry's hand as though the gentle motion might somehow reach through his unconsciousness. The door opened quietly, and a healer entered, a middle-aged witch with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. She nodded to them as she moved to check the monitoring charms. Any change, Healer Abernathy? Molly asked anxiously. He's stabilizing nicely, the healer assured her. The Skillgrow is working on his arm, and we've treated the concussion. The dehydration was our biggest concern, but the replenishing potions are doing their job. When will he wake up? Ron asked. It's hard to say, Healer Abernathy replied honestly. The body sometimes needs to shut down to heal itself. He's been through a significant trauma, not just physically but magically as well. Magically? Ginny echoed with concern. The healer nodded gravely. There were signs of magical suppression, not from Mr. Potter himself, but imposed externally. Amateur work, thankfully, or the damage could have been much worse. Molly's grip tightened involuntarily on Harry's hand. Those people were trying to suppress his magic. It appears so, the healer confirmed. We're running more tests to determine the extent of it, but his magical core is already showing signs of recovery now that the suppression has been removed. Will there be any lasting effects? Molly asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't believe so, Healer Abernathy said reassuringly. Mr. Potter has a remarkably resilient magical signature. Once he's fully recovered physically, his magic should return to normal levels. A small moan from the bed drew their attention immediately. Harry's eyelids flickered, though they didn't open. Harry? Ron leaned forward eagerly. Mate, can you hear us? Another moan, slightly stronger. Harry's head turned slightly toward the sound of Ron's voice. That's a good sign, the healer said, quickly checking his vitals. He's starting to respond to external stimuli. Keep talking to him, familiar voices can help guide patients back to consciousness. Harry, dear, Molly said, her voice gentle but clear. You're safe now. You're at St. Mungo's. We're all here with you, Ron, Ginny, and me. Arthur and the others will be here soon. Harry's fingers twitched within her grasp. We came to get you, mate, Ron continued, taking his cue from his mother. The whole family. Even Percy, if you can believe it. And Kingsley and Tonks came too, Ginny added. Professional Auror Escort and everything. Very impressive. A ghost of a smile seemed to touch Harry's lips for just a moment. That's it, Harry, Molly encouraged. Come back to us when you're ready. No rush. The door opened again, and Arthur entered with Bill, Charlie, Fred, George, and Percy behind him. They moved quietly to the foot of the bed, their expressions solemn as they took in Harry's condition. How is he? Arthur asked softly. Responding to voices, Molly reported, her eyes brightening with cautious hope. The healer says he's stabilizing. Arthur nodded, relief evident on his tired face. Good. That's good. The Dursleys? Molly asked, her tone suggesting she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to know the details. Detained, Arthur replied simply. Tonks is handling it. They won't hurt him again, Molly. A visible weight seemed to lift from her shoulders. And the blood protection? Petunia mentioned, Bill's already working on alternatives, Arthur assured her, nodding to their eldest son. Bill stepped forward, his earring catching the light as he moved. The blood wards were weakened already, he explained. Likely because Harry never truly considered that place home. I've contacted some colleagues at Gringotts, we can establish new protective measures based on chosen family bonds rather than blood. Chosen family, Molly repeated softly, looking down at Harry's pale face. Yes, that seems right. A stirring from the bed drew everyone's attention. Harry's eyelids fluttered more insistently, and his breathing pattern changed. I think he's waking up, Ron said excitedly. They gathered closer, forming a protective circle around the bed as Harry fought his way back to consciousness. After several tense moments, his eyes opened, unfocused without his glasses but unmistakably aware. Ron, he croaked, his voice painfully dry. I'm here, mate, Ron confirmed immediately, moving into Harry's limited field of vision. We all are. Harry blinked slowly, confusion evident on his face. Where? St. Mungo's, dear, Molly answered, gently squeezing his hand. You're in hospital. Harry's brow furrowed as he tried to piece together what had happened. Dursleys? He asked, a note of anxiety entering his voice. Gone, Arthur said firmly. They'll never hurt you again, Harry. That's a promise. Relief flooded Harry's expression, followed quickly by confusion. But Dumbledore said. Dumbledore was wrong, Molly said, with a firmness that surprised even her. He was wrong to leave you with those people, and we were wrong to let it continue for so long. Harry seemed to struggle with this concept, his medication-fogged mind trying to reconcile this new reality with everything he'd been told before. Blood protection, he mumbled. We're working on better alternatives, Bill assured him. Protections based on bonds you've chosen, not ones forced upon you. Harry's eyes widened slightly, hope and disbelief warring in their green depths. You mean? I don't have to go back. Never, Ron said vehemently. Not ever. The simple confirmation seemed to overwhelm Harry. His eyes filled with tears that he was too weak to fight. It's all right, dear, Molly soothed, brushing his hair back from his forehead with maternal gentleness. It's all right to feel relieved. You're safe now. Thank you, Harry whispered, his voice breaking. All of you, thank you. No need for thanks, Harry, Fred said, unusually serious. Your family, George added simply. Harry's gaze traveled around the circle of redheads surrounding his bed, lingering on each face as though memorizing them. Even in his weakened state, the significance of their actions wasn't lost on him. They had come for him. All of them. They had faced the Dursleys, defied Dumbledore, and broken who knew how many rules, all for him. Family, he repeated softly, as though testing the word. That's right, Arthur confirmed, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. And families protect each other. A wave of exhaustion seemed to wash over Harry, his eyelids growing heavy again despite his evident desire to stay awake. Rest now, Healer Abernathy advised gently. Your body needs to heal. Your family will be here when you wake again. Harry's gaze sought Molly's, a question in his eyes that he was too tired to articulate. We'll be right here, she promised, understanding his unspoken fear of waking alone. Get some sleep, dear. Reassured, Harry allowed his eyes to close, his breathing gradually evening out as he slipped back into a healing sleep. The Weasleys maintained their protective circle around the bed, a living barrier between Harry and a world that had failed him too many times before. In the soft glow of the monitoring charms, their shadows stretched across the hospital room floor, 7 figures standing guard against the darkness. Outside the window, the first pale light of dawn broke across the London skyline. A new day was beginning, the first day of Harry Potter's life without the Dursleys. And though many challenges still lay ahead, for now, in this moment, he was safe. He was protected. He was home. Chapter 2, The Reckoning. Morning light streamed through the enchanted windows of St. Mungo's, casting warm patterns across Harry's hospital room. The magical windows showed a peaceful countryside scene rather than the actual view of London's brick buildings, a small mercy that made the sterile room feel less confined. Harry stirred, consciousness returning in gradual waves. The pain that had been his constant companion for days had receded to a dull ache, replaced by an unusual floating sensation that he recognized as the effect of potions. He blinked, the world a blurry haze without his glasses. Here you go, mate. Ron's voice came from nearby, followed by the familiar weight of glasses being gently placed on his face. The world snapped into focus. Ron sat beside the bed, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. Beyond him, Harry could make out several sleeping forms in conjured armchairs, Mrs. Weasley, her head resting on Mr. Weasley's shoulder, Ginny curled up like a cat in an oversized chair, and Fred and George, somehow managing to share a single seat, their limbs tangled in what looked like uncomfortable positions. They've been here all night, Ron explained, following Harry's gaze. Wouldn't leave even when the healers tried to chase them out. Mum can be scary when she wants to be. What time is it? Harry asked, his voice scratchy from disuse. Just past 7 in the morning, Ron replied, pouring a glass of water from a pitcher on the bedside table. Here, the healer said you should drink when you wake up. Harry accepted the glass gratefully, the cool water soothing his parched throat. As he drank, memories of the previous night gradually assembled themselves in his mind, the Weasleys arriving at Privet Drive, the confrontation with the Dursleys, being carried out on a stretcher. It wasn't a dream, then, he murmured, more to himself than to Ron. "No," Ron confirmed quietly. "Not a dream." Harry set the empty glass down, studying his friend's face. "You look terrible." A surprised laugh burst from Ron. "Bloody hell, Harry. You're in hospital with a broken arm and who knows what else, and you're worried about how I look." Harry shrugged, then winced as the movement sent a twinge of pain through his shoulder. "Force of habit, I guess." Ron's expression sobered. "How are you feeling?" "Really?" Harry considered the question, taking stock of his body. "Better than yesterday," he finally said. "Everything still hurts, but it's distant somehow." "Pain potions," Ron nodded. "The healer said they've got you on the good stuff." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft snoring from the direction of the twins. Harry found himself oddly calm, as though the events of the past night had happened to someone else entirely. He supposed that was the potions too. "Harry," Ron began hesitantly, "what happened at the Dursleys?" "Before we got there, I mean." Harry's gaze drifted to the enchanted window, focusing on the swaying grasses of the illusory meadow. "Vernon was angry," he said flatly. "More than usual." "Because of the tournament?" "What happened with Cedric?" "Partly that," Harry nodded. "But also because Hedwig kept bringing letters from the magical world. He said it was endangering Dudley, having those freakish birds coming to the house." Ron's hands clenched into fists, but he remained silent, letting Harry continue at his own pace. "He tried to lock Hedwig up, but she fought him. That's how she got hurt. I tried to stop him, and he, well, you saw." Harry gestured vaguely to his arm, still bandaged despite the skill grow. "I fell down the stairs. Or was pushed. It gets fuzzy after that." "You were locked in that room for 3 days," Ron said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "With no food, no water, and a broken arm." Harry closed his eyes briefly. "I don't remember much of that part. I think I was unconscious for most of it." "Small mercies," Ron muttered darkly. Before Harry could respond, a soft rustling came from across the room as Molly Weasley stirred, her maternal instincts apparently alerting her to the conversation. Her eyes opened, immediately finding Harry's. "You're awake," she said, carefully extracting herself from her husband's side without waking him. She crossed to Harry's bed, her hand automatically reaching to smooth his unruly hair. "How are you feeling, dear?" "I'm okay, Mrs. Weasley," Harry assured her, though the gentle touch nearly undid him. "Thanks to all of you." Molly's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her voice remained steady. "The healers say you're responding well to treatment. Your arm should be fully mended by tomorrow, though you'll need to wear a sling for another week to let the muscles heal properly." Harry nodded, oddly touched by her matter-of-fact recitation of his medical status. It was strangely comforting, being fussed over for injuries rather than being the one expected to cause them. "Mrs. Weasley," he began hesitantly. "What's going to happen now?" "With the Dursleys, I mean." Molly exchanged a glance with Ron, clearly weighing how much to share. "They've been detained," she said carefully. "There will be proceedings. Both magical and muggle." "Detained?" Harry echoed, struggling to imagine Vernon and Petunia in wizarding custody. "Like Azkaban?" "No, nothing like that," Molly assured him quickly. "A secure ministry facility. They'll face charges of child abuse and neglect." Harry absorbed this information in silence. The concept of the Dursleys being held accountable for their treatment of him was so foreign that his mind struggled to process it. "I don't understand," he finally said. "Why now?" "I mean, I've been telling people for years that they didn't want me." "Telling people they didn't want you isn't the same as revealing abuse, Harry," came Arthur's voice as he too woke, joining the conversation. "And I'm afraid we adults failed you by not looking more closely at what you weren't saying." Harry dropped his gaze to his hands, uncomfortable with the implication that what had happened to him was somehow extraordinary. It wasn't that bad, he mumbled. Not really. Not compared to what other people go through. Harry James Potter, Molly said, her tone suddenly stern. Look at me. Surprised by her tone, Harry raised his eyes to meet hers. What those people did to you was wrong, she stated firmly. Being locked in a room, denied food, physically hurt, none of that is acceptable. Not under any circumstances. Not compared to anything. But Dumbledore said I had to stay there, Harry argued weakly. The blood protection was not worth this price, Arthur interrupted gently. No protection is worth the kind of harm they inflicted on you. Harry fell silent, unable to formulate a response. For so long, he'd accepted his life with the Dursleys as an unpleasant necessity, something to be endured for the greater good. The idea that adults he respected, were now telling him it should never have been allowed was both validating and deeply unsettling. The moment was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. A young healer entered, carrying a tray of potions. Good morning, Mr. Potter, she greeted cheerfully. Time for your next round of medications. And I see your family is still here, she added with a pointed look at the Weasleys. Despite Healer Abernathy's suggestion about proper visiting hours. We're not going anywhere, Molly said pleasantly but firmly. The healer sighed but didn't argue, instead turning her attention to checking Harry's vitals with practiced efficiency. Your magical levels are improving nicely, she reported as she examined the colorful monitoring charms floating above the bed. The suppression effects are diminishing faster than expected. Suppression effects? Harry asked, confused. The healer hesitated, glancing at Molly and Arthur as if seeking guidance. It's all right, Arthur nodded. He should know. We found evidence of magical suppression charms in your system, Mr. Potter, the healer explained professionally. Crude but persistent spellwork, likely cast repeatedly over several years. It was restricting your natural magical development. Harry stared at her in shock. Someone was suppressing my magic. Who? Your uncle, we believe, Arthur said grimly. Bill found traces of the spellwork at your relative's house. But Vernon hates magic, Harry protested. He wouldn't use it himself. Not directly, Molly agreed. But there are items that can be purchased, even by muggles who know where to look. Suppression amulets, warding stones. Illegal, of course, but available on the black market. We found several such items hidden around your bedroom, Arthur added. Under the floorboards, in the walls. Bill recognized them immediately. Harry's mind reeled with this new information. So all this time, they weren't just trying to stop me from doing magic, they were actually suppressing it? It appears so, the healer confirmed. But the good news is that the effects are temporary. Once the suppression is removed, which we've done, your natural magic reasserts itself. In fact, she added with a small smile, you might find yourself a bit more magically robust once you're fully recovered. As if to illustrate her point, the monitoring charms above the bed suddenly flared brighter, responding to Harry's surge of emotion. The healer quickly adjusted them, murmuring a calming incantation. Easy there, she advised. Strong emotions can amplify magical energy, especially as the suppression lifts. Try to stay calm for now. Harry took a deep breath, focusing on the breathing exercises he'd learned for Quidditch. Gradually, the monitoring charms returned to their steady glow. Good, the healer approved. Now, these potions will help continue the healing process. She indicated the array of vials on her tray. The blue one is for bone regeneration, the green for tissue repair, and the red for magical core stabilization. They may make you feel a bit drowsy. Harry dutifully swallowed each potion, grimacing at their various unpleasant flavors. Almost immediately, a warm heaviness began to spread through his limbs. Rest is the best medicine, the healer advised, collecting the empty vials. I'll be back to check on you in a few hours. As she left, Harry fought against the encroaching drowsiness. I don't want to sleep yet, he protested weakly. I have more questions. We'll be here when you wake up, Molly promised, squeezing his hand gently. All your questions can wait. But the Dursleys. Harry's eyelids grew heavier. What will happen to them? Justice, Harry, Arthur said, his voice seeming to come from farther away as the potions took effect. That's what will happen. Harry wanted to ask what that meant, exactly, but the combination of potions proved too powerful. His last conscious thought before sleep claimed him was a strange mixture of guilt and relief, guilt that his complaints had brought such serious consequences to his relatives, and relief that, for the first time, someone had actually listened. The next time Harry woke, the enchanted windows showed an evening sky streaked with orange and pink. The room was quieter now, with fewer Weasleys present. Molly sat in a chair beside his bed, knitting what looked like a jumper with concentrated movements of her wand. Arthur was absent, as were the twins and Percy. Ron and Ginny played a quiet game of chess on a small conjured table in the corner. Mrs. Weasley. Harry's voice sounded stronger to his own ears. Molly looked up immediately, her knitting falling to her lap. Harry, dear. How are you feeling? Better, he said, and meant it. The pain had receded further, and his head felt clearer. Where is everyone? Arthur's at the ministry with Bill and Percy, she explained, setting her knitting aside. There's a hearing today about your situation. Fred and George went home to shower and change, they'll be back this evening. Charlie's meeting with some ward specialists about alternative protections for you. At the mention of the hearing, Harry felt a knot form in his stomach. A hearing? About me? About the Dursleys, Molly clarified. And about your guardianship going forward. Ron and Ginny abandoned their chess game, moving to join them. You look better, Ginny observed, perching on the foot of his bed. I feel better, Harry confirmed. But I'm worried about this hearing. Will I have to testify or something? No, Molly assured him. Kingsley and Tonks collected memories from the scene, and the healer's reports provide all the necessary evidence. You won't need to be involved at all. Besides, Ron added, Dumbledore's back. He's at the hearing too. Harry's eyes widened. Dumbledore? But I thought he was away. He returned early when he heard what happened, Ginny explained. According to Dad, he's not exactly happy that we went against his arrangements. Oh. Harry felt a familiar weight of disappointment settle in his chest. So I'll have to go back after all. Absolutely not, Molly said firmly. Under no circumstances will you return to those people, Dumbledore's wishes notwithstanding. The vehemence in her voice startled Harry. But if Dumbledore says, Dumbledore is not the final authority on your well-being, Molly interrupted, a dangerous glint in her eye. I respect Albus enormously, but in this matter, he has been wrong. Gravely wrong. Mum's been passionate on this point, Ron said, a hint of pride in his voice. You should have heard her when Dumbledore first showed up here yesterday. You argued with Dumbledore? Harry asked, unable to keep the awe from his voice. Few people ever challenged the venerable headmaster. Someone needed to, Molly said simply. Before Harry could respond, the door opened, and Healer Abernathy entered, accompanied by a stern-looking witch in formal robes bearing the insignia of the Department of Magical Child Welfare. Mr. Potter, the witch greeted him with professional detachment. I am Madame Forsyth from the Ministry. I need to ask you some questions about your living situation with your relatives. Harry tensed, automatically looking to Mrs. Weasley for guidance. Perhaps this could wait? Molly suggested, noting Harry's discomfort. He's still recovering. I'm afraid it can't, Madame Forsyth replied, though not unkindly. The Wisengamot is in special session regarding this case, and they require Mr. Potter's statement before proceeding. Harry sat up straighter, wincing slightly as his healing arm protested the movement. It's okay, Mrs. Weasley. I can answer some questions. Healer Abernathy conjured additional chairs, and the ministry which sat down, producing an enchanted quill and parchment that hovered beside her, ready to record. "Mr. Potter," she began formally, "I need to establish a few facts about your life with the Dursley family. Please understand that my questions may seem personal or distressing, but they are necessary for the legal proceedings." Harry nodded, steeling himself. "How long have you lived with Vernon and Petunia Dursley?" "Since I was a year old," Harry answered. "After my parents died." The quill scratched across the parchment, recording his words. "And during that time, how would you characterize their treatment of you?" Harry hesitated, uncomfortable with the direct question. They never wanted me there," he said carefully. "They made that clear from the beginning." "Could you be more specific about how they made this clear?" Harry shifted, looking down at his hands. "They told me. Often. And they treated me differently from their son, Dudley." "Differently how?" "Dudley had 2 bedrooms, one for sleeping and one for his extra things. I slept in a cupboard under the stairs until I was 11. Madame Forsyth's professional demeanor cracked slightly at this, her eyebrows rising in surprise. "A cupboard? For 10 years?" Harry nodded, not trusting himself to speak further on the matter. "I see," she said, composing herself. "And what about meals? Were you fed adequately?" "Not always," Harry admitted quietly. "If I did something wrong, or if strange things happened, magical things, though I didn't know that's what they were then, they would send me to my cupboard without food. Sometimes for days." The quill raced across the parchment. Molly's knitting needles had stilled in her lap, her knuckles white where she gripped them. "And the incident 3 days ago," Madame Forsyth continued. "Could you describe what led to your injuries?" Harry recounted the confrontation with Vernon over Hedwig as factually as he could, trying to distance himself from the emotions associated with the memory. He described Vernon's rage, the physical altercation, and his subsequent imprisonment in his room. "Mr. Potter," Madame Forsyth said when he had finished, her voice gentler now, "was this the first time your uncle had physically harmed you?" Harry's silence was answer enough. "For the record, Mr. Potter," she prompted quietly. "No," Harry finally whispered. "It wasn't the first time." The quill paused as if even it was surprised by this admission. "Thank you for your honesty," Madame Forsyth said, genuinely sympathetic now. "I have just one more question. If you could choose your living arrangements going forward, what would you prefer?" Harry looked up, startled by the question. No one had ever asked him that before. I don't know," he said honestly. "I never thought I had a choice." "Everyone has choices, Mr. Potter," Madame Forsyth said firmly. "Even children. Especially in matters concerning their own welfare." Harry glanced at Ron and Ginny, then at Mrs. Weasley, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "If I could choose," he said slowly, "I'd want to live somewhere, safe. Somewhere I'm not locked up or starved or treated like a burden." He swallowed hard. "Somewhere like the Burrow," he added in a whisper. Madame Forsyth nodded, making a final note herself rather than relying on the quill. "Thank you, Mr. Potter. Your statement will be presented to the Waisengamot today. I believe they will find it most illuminating." She stood, gathering her materials. "I wish you a speedy recovery." With a respectful nod to Molly and the others, she departed, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. "I've never said all that out loud before," Harry said after a moment, his voice strangely distant. "It sounds worse when you say it all together like that." "That's because it is worse than you've allowed yourself to believe," Molly said gently, moving to sit beside him on the bed. "Oh, Harry. I wish we had known sooner." Harry shrugged, uncomfortable with the pity in her voice. "It doesn't matter now." "It does matter," Ginny spoke up unexpectedly, her brown eyes fierce. "It matters because it should never have happened, and it matters because it's part of who you are, even if you don't want it to be." Harry met her gaze, surprised by her insight. Since her own traumatic experience with Tom Riddle's diary, Ginny had developed a perceptiveness beyond her years. Miss Weasley is quite right, Healer Abernathy interjected kindly. Acknowledging past traumas is an essential part of healing from them. I'm not traumatized, Harry objected automatically. I'm fine. The healer smiled sadly. That's what most trauma survivors say, Mr. Potter. It's a normal response. But healing takes time, and it begins with truth. Before Harry could argue further, the door opened again, this time admitting Arthur Weasley, followed by Bill and Percy. All three looked tired but satisfied. Arthur. Molly rose to greet her husband. How did it go? Better than expected, Arthur replied, kissing her cheek before turning to Harry. The Wizengamot has reached a preliminary decision regarding your guardianship. Harry's heart rate quickened. And Arthur said with a small smile, pending your approval, you will be placed under the guardianship of Molly and myself until you come of age. The monitoring charms above Harry's bed flared brightly in response to his surge of emotion. Really? He asked, hardly daring to believe it. But what about Dumbledore? The blood protection. Dumbledore presented his case for maintaining the blood protection, Bill explained, but it was overruled in light of the evidence of abuse. The fact that the protection was already failing made his argument rather moot, Percy added with unusual bluntness. Blood wards require not just a blood connection but a genuine home environment. The Dursleys provided neither. But what about Vol, you know who? Harry asked, glancing apologetically at Ron, who still flinched at the name. Won't I be in danger without the protection? That's where I come in, Bill said, perching on the windowsill. We're setting up alternative protections at the Burrow. Different from blood wards, but equally powerful in their own way. What kind of protections? Harry asked, genuinely curious. Bond-based wards, Bill explained, his earring glinting in the evening light. They draw strength from freely given emotional connections rather than compulsory blood ties. In many ways, they're actually stronger than blood wards, particularly when the bonds they're based on are, well, like our families. The point is, Arthur continued, you'll be safe, Harry. And more importantly, you'll be with people who care for you. If that's what you want, of course, Molly added quickly. The choice is yours, dear. Harry looked around at the Weasleys, Arthur standing tall and kind, Molly with her maternal concern, Bill with his confident competence, Percy trying to hide his emotional investment behind his professional demeanor, Ron grinning hopefully, and Ginny watching him with quiet understanding. For a moment, he thought his heart might burst from the feeling that welled up inside him. Yes, he managed through the tightness in his throat. Yes, that's what I want. Molly's face broke into a radiant smile. Well, that's settled then, she said briskly, though her voice quavered slightly. As soon as the healers give their approval, you'll come home to the Burrow. Home. The word echoed in Harry's mind like a promise. Not just a place to stay for the summer, not just somewhere to exist between terms at Hogwarts, but a home. A family. What about the Dursleys? He asked, suddenly remembering the other part of the hearing. What's going to happen to them? The adults exchanged glances, silently debating how much to share. The Wizengamot has remanded them to Muggle authorities, Arthur finally explained. With certain, magical stipulations attached. What does that mean? Harry pressed. It means, Percy said with unusual satisfaction, that they will face Muggle justice for child abuse and neglect, with magical safeguards to ensure they cannot evade the consequences through legal maneuvering or social connections. And it means, Bill added more gently, that they will never be able to return to Privet Drive. The house has been magically sealed to them. Sealed? Harry echoed. An ancient but effective spell, Bill explained. They will be physically unable to approach the property. Should they try, they'll find themselves suddenly remembering urgent appointments elsewhere. They're being relocated to a different part of the country, Arthur continued. Their memories have been modified, not erased, but adjusted. They remember raising you, but the details have been softened. They believe you've been removed from their care due to irreconcilable differences rather than abuse. What about Dudley? Harry asked, surprising himself with the question. Despite everything, he didn't wish genuine harm on his cousin. Your cousin was not directly implicated in the abuse, Percy answered. He will remain with his parents, though the family will receive mandatory counseling as part of their sentencing. Harry nodded, absorbing this information. It was strange to think of the Dursleys continuing their lives elsewhere, without him, their memories altered to ease their guilt. It felt both just and merciful, a fitting end to his relationship with them. So they'll never see morning at Privet Drive again, he murmured, echoing the phrase he'd heard several times now. No, Arthur confirmed. That chapter of your life is closed, Harry. For good. The word settled over him like a warming charm, melting something cold and hard that had resided in his chest for as long as he could remember. The Dursleys were gone. Not dead, not imprisoned in some terrible magical dungeon as part of a vindictive revenge, but simply, gone. Removed from his life with the same finality with which they had once tried to remove magic from his. There's one more thing, Bill said, reaching into his pocket. We found this at Privet Drive. He handed Harry a small, leather-bound notebook. It was hidden under the floorboards in the cupboard under the stairs. Harry took it with trembling hands, instantly recognizing the journal he had started in his first year at Hogwarts. In it, he had documented every incident of mistreatment by the Dursleys, initially as a way to remind himself that he wasn't imagining things, and later as a record he thought he might someday share with a trusted adult. You found this? He asked, his voice barely audible. Fred did, Bill confirmed. It was instrumental in the hearing today. Harry clutched the journal tightly. I never thought anyone would read it. I never thought anyone would believe me. We believe you, Harry, Molly said firmly. And more importantly, the Wizengamot believes you. That journal, combined with the evidence from Privet Drive and the healer's reports, left no room for doubt. Harry opened the journal to a random page, seeing his own younger handwriting describing a week spent locked in his cupboard after an incident of accidental magic had turned his teacher's wig blue. The memory felt oddly distant now, as though it had happened to someone else. You don't need this anymore, dear, Molly said gently. Unless you want to keep it. Harry considered the question, weighing the journal in his hands. It represented years of silent suffering, years of hoping someone would notice, someone would care. And now, finally, someone had. I think, he said slowly, I'd like to keep it. Not to dwell on it, but to remember that it's over now. Molly nodded, understanding in her eyes. Of course. A comfortable silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft humming of the monitoring charms. After a moment, Harry spoke again. You said Dumbledore came back for the hearing? Arthur nodded. He did. Was he angry about what you all did? Concerned, certainly, Arthur said diplomatically. He believed very strongly in the blood protection. He wasn't happy, Percy stated more bluntly. But he was overruled. By the Wizengamot? By your mother, initially, Arthur said with a fond glance at Molly. And then by the evidence itself. Even Dumbledore couldn't argue with what we found at Privet Drive. I'd like to see him, Harry said suddenly. Dumbledore, I mean. If he's still here. The adults exchanged glances again. I believe he's still at the ministry, Arthur said cautiously. But Harry, you don't need to confront him right now. You're still healing. I'm not going to confront him, Harry clarified. I need to understand why. Why he left me there all those years. Why he never checked. That's a reasonable question, Bill acknowledged. But it might be better to wait until you're stronger. Harry shook his head stubbornly. I've been waiting for answers my whole life. I'm tired of waiting. I'll see if he can come by this evening, Arthur conceded, recognizing the determination in Harry's expression. But only for a short visit, and only if Healer Abernathy approves. Harry nodded, satisfied with this compromise. The healer, who had been quietly observing the conversation, stepped forward. A brief visit would be acceptable, she said, provided Mr. Potter continues to rest and avoid emotional distress. Thank you, Harry said sincerely. Now, the healer continued, it's time for your evening potions and another examination. I'm afraid I'll need to ask your visitors to step outside for a few minutes. The Weasleys filed out, promising to return shortly. As the door closed behind them, Harry lay back against his pillows, his mind spinning with everything he had learned. The Dursleys were gone from his life forever. He was going to live with the Weasleys, a real home, with a real family. And soon, he would finally get answers from Dumbledore himself. For the first time in as long as he could remember, the future looked not just bearable, but bright. An hour later, Harry sat propped up in bed, feeling significantly improved after his latest round of potions and a light dinner. The Weasleys had returned, bringing with them a surprise visitor, Hermione Granger, who had arrived at the Burrow that afternoon after receiving Ron's urgent owl. "Oh, Harry," she exclaimed upon seeing him, rushing to his bedside. "I came as soon as I could. Ron told me everything. It's absolutely dreadful what those awful people did to you." "I'm okay, Hermione," Harry assured her, touched by her concern. "Really? The healers say I'll be good as new in a couple of days." "That's not the point," she insisted, perching on the edge of his bed. "The point is that it should never have happened in the first place. I always knew those Dursleys were terrible, but this," she broke off, seeming too angry to continue. "Hermione's been researching magical guardianship laws since she arrived," Ron explained with a fond roll of his eyes. 3 hours and she's already found 17 precedents for your case." 19, actually, Hermione corrected absently. "The hearing may be over, but it's important to understand the legal framework for Harry's new living arrangements." Harry couldn't help smiling. Trust Hermione to approach even this situation as an academic challenge. "The bond-based wards are particularly fascinating," she continued enthusiastically. "I've never read about them before, but Bill explained the theory, and it's really quite brilliant. Instead of using blood ties, which can be problematic if the relationship is strained, they utilize emotional connections freely given and received." "The magical resonance between," Hermione, Ron interrupted gently, "maybe save the ward theory for when Harry's not still on healing potions." She blushed slightly. "Right. Sorry, Harry." "It's okay," he assured her. "I'm just glad you're here." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Arthur, who had left earlier to send a message to Dumbledore, returned with a grave expression. "He's here," he announced quietly. "Are you sure you're up to this, Harry?" Harry nodded, squaring his shoulders despite the twinge of pain the movement caused. "I'm sure." "We'll step outside," Molly said, gathering her things. "No," Harry said quickly. "Stay. Please. All of you." He glanced around at the assembled Weasleys and Hermione. "I'd like you to hear this too." Molly looked uncertain. "Harry, dear, these might be private matters. You're my family now," Harry said simply. "I don't want secrets." A touched silence followed his words. Then Arthur nodded and opened the door wider. "He can see you now, Albus," he said to someone in the hallway. Albus Dumbledore entered the room, his tall figure somehow managing to look both imposing and subdued. The usual twinkle was absent from his blue eyes as they found Harry in the hospital bed. "Harry," he said softly. "I am deeply sorry to find you in these circumstances." Harry studied the headmaster's face, searching for something. Guilt? Remorse? Understanding? He wasn't sure what he hoped to find. "Professor," he acknowledged with a small nod. "Thank you for coming." Dumbledore conjured a comfortable armchair beside Harry's bed and sat down, his movements carrying a weariness that hadn't been present before the summer. "I understand you have questions for me," he said directly. I will answer them as honestly as I can. Harry appreciated the straightforward approach. Why did you leave me with the Dursleys? He asked, the question that had haunted him for years finally spoken aloud. You must have known they hated magic. You must have known they wouldn't want me. Dumbledore sighed deeply, the sound carrying the weight of old regrets. Yes, Harry, I knew they were not the ideal guardians. Minerva McGonagall observed them the day before you were placed there and reported her concerns. But at the time, the blood protection offered by your mother's sacrifice seemed paramount. More important than my happiness. My safety. I believed, wrongly, as it turns out, that your physical safety from Voldemort outweighed other considerations, Dumbledore admitted. And I hoped, perhaps naively, that Petunia's blood tie to Lily would eventually overcome her resentment. But it didn't, Harry said flatly. And you never checked. A flash of genuine pain crossed Dumbledore's face. I did check, Harry, though clearly not thoroughly enough. I placed a squib, Arabella Fig, in your neighborhood to monitor your situation. Her reports indicated neglect, certainly, but not the level of abuse that has now come to light. Mrs. Fig? Harry was startled by this revelation. She knew about magic. About me? She did, Dumbledore confirmed. And she reported regularly. But it seems she either missed or underreported the worst aspects of your treatment. For that failure of oversight, I bear the ultimate responsibility. Harry absorbed this information in silence. The idea that someone had been watching him all those years, reporting back to Dumbledore, and yet the worst abuses had continued unchecked, left a bitter taste in his mouth. And when I came to Hogwarts, he pressed. I told you I didn't want to go back. Every year, I asked to stay at the castle over summer. You did, Dumbledore acknowledged. And each time, I insisted on the importance of the blood protection, believing it to be the strongest defense against Voldemort's inevitable return. Even after what happened in the Chamber of Secrets. After the Philosopher's Stone. After last year and the tournament. Harry's voice rose slightly with each question. Even after all that, you still sent me back to people who locked me up and starved me? The monitoring charms flared in response to his agitation. Molly moved to his side, placing a calming hand on his shoulder. Easy, dear, she murmured. Remember what the healer said about strong emotions. Harry took a deep breath, fighting for control. Sorry, he muttered. No, Harry, Dumbledore said quietly. It is I who should apologize. You are entirely right to question my decisions. They were made with the best of intentions, but as I am painfully learning, good intentions are not always enough. The blood protection wasn't even working properly anymore, Bill pointed out from his position by the window. Our diagnostic charms showed significant degradation. Yes, Dumbledore nodded. I have reviewed your findings, Mr. Weasley, and I cannot dispute them. The protection had indeed weakened, likely due to the environment in which Harry was forced to live. So it was all for nothing, Harry concluded bitterly. All those years, all that, everything they did. It didn't even work. Not for nothing, Harry, Dumbledore corrected gently. The protection did function, however imperfectly, during your early years. It prevented Voldemort's remaining followers from locating you when you were most vulnerable. But you are correct that in recent years, particularly since Voldemort's return, its efficacy had diminished significantly. And now? Harry asked. Now that I won't be going back there, what happens? Now, Dumbledore said, with a glance at the Weasleys, we implement alternative protections, as William has suggested. Bond-based wards are indeed a viable alternative, particularly given the strength of your connection to the Weasley family. You're not going to try to send me back? Harry asked, unable to keep the suspicion from his voice. No, Harry, Dumbledore said firmly. That chapter is closed. The Wisengamot has ruled, and more importantly, it is clear to me now that returning you to the Dursleys would be neither safe nor beneficial. Harry studied the headmaster's face, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, he nodded slowly, accepting the answer. "There's one more thing I don't understand," he said after a moment. "When I was younger, before Hogwarts, before I knew about magic, sometimes things would happen. Accidental magic. And afterward, Uncle Vernon would punish me, and then the magic would stop for a while. Was that the suppression you found? Did he somehow know how to suppress my magic?" A shadow crossed Dumbledore's face. "That," he said gravely, "is perhaps the most troubling aspect of this situation. The suppression items found at Privet Drive suggest that someone with knowledge of the magical world provided assistance to your uncle." "Someone helped him?" Harry asked, horrified at the implication. "It appears so," Dumbledore confirmed. "The items in question, suppression stones, aversion amulets, and similar devices, are not commonly known even within the wizarding world. They are dark artifacts, banned for decades. For your uncle to possess them, he must have acquired them from a magical source." "Who?" Harry demanded. "Who would do that?" "We don't yet know," Arthur interjected. "The Auror office is investigating. The items themselves have been taken to the Department of Mysteries for analysis." "We will find answers, Harry," Dumbledore assured him. "I promise you that." Harry nodded, though the revelation left him deeply unsettled. The idea that someone magical had actively helped the Dursleys in their efforts to suppress his abilities added a new dimension of betrayal to the situation. "I think," Molly said, noting Harry's increasing pallor, "that's enough for today. Harry needs rest." Dumbledore rose immediately. "Of course. I have taken enough of your time, Harry, and given you much to consider." He paused, then added with genuine remorse, "I failed you, and for that, I am truly sorry. I hope that in time, you might find it in your heart to forgive an old man's grievous mistake." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Harry. Despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to hate the headmaster. Dumbledore had made terrible errors in judgment, but Harry believed they had indeed been made with good intentions. "I don't hate you, Professor," he said quietly. I needed to understand." A very mature response, Dumbledore acknowledged with a sad smile. "You continue to show wisdom beyond your years, Harry. Far more than I have demonstrated, it seems." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I will, of course, assist with the establishment of the new protective wards at the Burrow. Whatever resources are required will be made available." "Thank you, Albus," Arthur said formally. With a final nod to the room at large, Dumbledore departed, his usually commanding presence somehow diminished by the weight of acknowledged failure. In the silence that followed, Harry leaned back against his pillows, suddenly exhausted despite having done nothing more strenuous than talk. "You should rest now, dear," Molly said, adjusting his blankets with maternal care. "Will you stay?" Harry asked, hating the neediness in his voice but unable to suppress it. "Of course," Molly assured him immediately. "We'll all take shifts. You won't be alone." The simple promise meant more to Harry than he could express. Not alone. After a lifetime of isolation, of feeling unwanted and burdensome, the steady presence of people who genuinely cared for him felt like the most powerful magic he had ever encountered. As he drifted toward sleep, lulled by the quiet conversation of the Weasleys and Hermione, Harry thought about the bond-based wards Bill had described. Protection built not on reluctant blood ties but on freely given love and acceptance. He wondered if his mother had known about such magic, if perhaps her sacrifice had been the ultimate expression of it. For the first time, he felt he truly understood what she had done for him. Not just died to save him, but loved him so completely that her protection had lingered long after she was gone. And now, that same kind of love, different in form but not in essence, would protect him again. With that comforting thought, Harry finally surrendered to sleep, his dreams for once untouched by nightmares of cupboards, locked doors, or the flash of green light that had taken his parents away. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through the enchanted windows and news that made the real sunlight pale in comparison. Harry was being discharged. The bone regrowth is complete, Healer Abernathy announced after her morning examination. Your magical levels have stabilized remarkably well, and the concussion has fully resolved. I see no reason to keep you here any longer, though you'll need to wear this sling for another week in return for a checkup in 3 days. Harry could hardly contain his excitement as he was helped into fresh clothes that Molly had brought from the Burrow. The prospect of leaving the hospital, of going to the Burrow not as a summer guest but as a permanent resident, filled him with a giddy lightness that not even the lingering soreness in his arm could dampen. Now remember, Molly fussed as she helped him button his shirt around the sling, you're to take it easy for at least a week. No flying, no degenoming, no roughhousing with the boys. Yes, Mrs. Weasley, Harry agreed, too happy to be bothered by the restrictions. And you'll need to take these potions twice daily, she continued, carefully packing the labeled vials into a small case. The blue one with breakfast, the green and red with dinner. I'll remember, he promised. Arthur arrived just as they were finishing the preparations, bringing news from the ministry. The bond ward specialists will arrive at the Burrow this afternoon, he reported. Bill and Charlie are already there, preparing the groundwork. And I've brought our transportation. He held up what appeared to be an ordinary teacup. Portkey directly to the Burrow, authorized by the Department of Magical Transportation. Excellent, Molly approved. Harry's all ready to go. We're just waiting for the final discharge papers. As if summoned by her words, Healer Abernathy returned with a sheaf of parchment. These are your discharge instructions, Mr. Potter, she explained, handing them to Harry. Activity restrictions, potion schedules, and the date for your follow-up appointment. And this, she added, giving a separate document to Arthur, is the official release to your new guardians. Harry's heart gave a peculiar lurch at the words, new guardians. It made the change in his status feel suddenly, undeniably real. All official, then? Arthur asked, glancing over the document. Completely, the healer confirmed with a smile. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. And to you, Mr. Potter. Thank you, Harry said sincerely. For everything. Just doing my job, she replied warmly. Though I must say, it's been an honor to treat you, Mr. Potter. Not because of your fame, she added quickly, seeing his expression, but because of the remarkable resilience you've shown. It's not every patient who manages to make a full magical recovery after prolonged suppression. Harry felt his face warm at the unexpected praise. I had a lot of help, he said, glancing at the Weasleys. Yes, you did, the healer agreed. And that's exactly as it should be. No one heals alone, Mr. Potter, not injuries of the body, and certainly not injuries of the spirit. With those parting words and a final check of his sling, she dismissed them, and Harry found himself being ushered toward the hospital's Portkey departure area, where Ron, Ginny, Fred, George, and Percy were already waiting. Ready to go home, mate? Ron asked, grinning broadly. Home. There was that word again, filling Harry with a warmth that had nothing to do with healing potions. More than ready, he replied with an answering grin. They gathered around Arthur, each placing a finger on the teacup-turned portkey. Harry, with his right arm in a sling, had to awkwardly use his left hand, but Ron steadied him with a supportive hand on his shoulder. On 3, Arthur instructed. 1, 2, 3. The familiar hook-behind-the-navel sensation seized Harry, and the hospital disappeared in a swirl of color and motion. When the world stabilized again, he found himself standing in the Burrow's sun-drenched garden, the familiar crooked house rising before him like a promise of everything he had ever wanted. Welcome home, Harry, Molly said softly beside him, her hand warm on his back. Home. Not just a word anymore, but a reality. His reality. As Harry moved toward the Burrow, surrounded by the chattering, laughing Weasleys, he felt a profound sense of rightness settle into his bones. The Dursleys would never see morning at Privet Drive again, and neither would he. Instead, he would see his mornings here, in this wonderful, chaotic, magical home, with people who had risked everything to bring him where he truly belonged. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter was truly, completely home. The Burrow buzzed with activity throughout the day as the Bond Ward specialists arrived and began their work. Harry, under strict orders to rest, found himself comfortably ensconced in an armchair in the living room, watching the proceedings with fascination. Bill Weasley coordinated the efforts, his expertise in curse-breaking and warding evident in the confident way he directed the specialists. Charlie assisted, his experience with magical creatures proving unexpectedly useful in handling some of the more temperamental magical components of the wards. The basic idea, Bill explained to Harry during a break, is to create a protective barrier that draws its power from the emotional bonds between you and our family. How does that work exactly? Harry asked, genuinely curious. Bill sat on the arm of Harry's chair, pushing his long hair back from his face. It's old magic, he said. Predates a lot of the more clinical spell work we use today. The theory is that emotional connections, particularly positive ones like love, loyalty, trust, generate their own kind of magical resonance. Like my mother's protection? Similar, yes, Bill nodded. Your mother's sacrifice created perhaps the purest form of this magic, protection born from unconditional love. What we're doing is creating a more distributed version, drawing on the connections between multiple people. And that's as strong as blood wards. Stronger, in many ways, Bill assured him. Blood wards rely on a single connection, in your case, the link to your aunt. If that connection is weak or compromised, so is the protection. Bond wards, on the other hand, draw from multiple sources. Every person who genuinely cares for you adds to their strength. Harry considered this, a warm feeling spreading through him as he looked around the Burrow at the Weasleys going about their various tasks. The idea that their affection for him could create tangible magical protection seemed both extraordinary and perfectly natural. Will I feel different? He asked. Once the wards are up. Bill smiled. You might. Most people report a sense of comfort, of security. Nothing dramatic, just a background awareness that you're protected. And will they know? If I'm in trouble or something? Bill's expression softened, understanding the real question behind Harry's words. Yes, he said gently. That's one of the advantages of bond wards. They create a kind of awareness. If you're in genuine danger, those connected to the wards will know. The reassurance settled something deep inside Harry that he hadn't even realized was unsettled. Never again would he face danger alone, unnoticed, unhelped. Now, Bill continued, rising from his perch, the final stage of the warding will require your participation, but not until evening. In the meantime, Mum insists you rest and eat something substantial. As if summoned by the mention of food, Molly appeared with a tray laden with sandwiches, fruit, and a steaming mug of something that smelled like chocolate. Here you are, dear, she said, settling the tray across Harry's lap. You need to build your strength back up. Thanks, Mrs. Weasley, Harry said, suddenly realizing he was, in fact, ravenous. Molly, dear, she corrected gently. Or Mum, if you prefer. Your family now, Harry. Harry swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat at the simple offer. Thanks. Molly, he managed, testing the name. She beamed at him, patted his cheek affectionately, and bustled back to the kitchen where she appeared to be preparing enough food to feed a small army. As Harry ate, he watched the controlled chaos of the Burrow with a sense of contentment he couldn't remember ever feeling before. Fred and George were helping with the wards in their own unique way, suggesting modifications that made the specialists alternatively laugh and look horrified. Percy sat at the dining table, meticulously reviewing legal documents relating to Harry's guardianship. Ron and Ginny were assisting Molly in the kitchen, though their efforts seemed to involve as much sampling as actual food preparation. Arthur had returned to the ministry for the afternoon but had promised to be back for the final warding ceremony. Hermione sat nearby, deeply engrossed in a tome titled, Effective Magics, bond theory and practice, occasionally looking up to share an interesting fact with Harry. "Did you know," she said, closing the book with a satisfied expression, "that bond wards were actually more common than blood wards until the late 17th century? They fell out of favor during the Age of Reason, when wizards started preferring magic with more measurable, quantifiable effects." "Really?" Harry said, genuinely interested. "Why are they coming back now?" "According to this," she tapped the book, "there's been a revival in interest in emotion-based magic over the last few decades. Some researchers believe it may actually be more powerful than more scientific approaches, especially for protective spells." "That makes sense," Harry mused. "I mean, my mum's protection was based on love, and that stopped Voldemort himself." Hermione nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. And now that you'll be living here permanently, the bonds you share with the Weasleys can create protection just as powerful." "It still feels strange," Harry admitted. "Living here permanently, I mean." "Good strange," he added quickly, "but strange." "It's a big change," Hermione acknowledged. "But Harry, I've never seen you look so relaxed. Even with everything that's happened, you seem more at peace." Harry considered this. Despite the physical discomfort of his healing injuries and the emotional turmoil of the past few days, he did feel a profound sense of relief. The constant background anxiety he'd lived with for as long as he could remember, the knowledge that whatever moments of happiness he experienced at Hogwarts or with his friends would inevitably end, forcing him back to Privet Drive, was gone. "I think," he said slowly, "it's because I don't have to go back. Ever. It's like I've been holding my breath for years without realizing it, and now I can finally breathe." Hermione's eyes glistened with sudden tears. "Oh, Harry," she whispered. "I wish we'd known sooner. I wish we'd done something sooner." "You did know, in a way," Harry said, not unkindly. "All of you. I gave hints. But I didn't want to admit how bad it really was, and I think maybe no one wanted to believe it either." "Well, it's over now," Hermione said firmly, wiping her eyes. "And you never have to go back." "Never have to go back," Harry repeated softly, letting the reality of those words sink in. "You know, I've been thinking about something Dumbledore said yesterday." "What's that?" "He said my mother's protection worked through Aunt Petunia because of their blood connection, even though she didn't love me. But if love is the basis of the protection, and Petunia didn't love me, then the protection shouldn't have worked at all," Hermione finished, her brow furrowing in concentration. Unless it wasn't her feelings that mattered," Harry concluded. "But my mother's. Her love continued to protect me, regardless of how Petunia felt." "That would explain why the protection weakened over time," Hermione said thoughtfully. "Not because of anything Petunia did or didn't do, but because you yourself never felt at home there, never accepted it as the place you belonged. And the new wards will be different because they're based on mutual bonds," Hermione explained, warming to the topic. "Not just the Weasleys' feelings for you, but yours for them as well. The reciprocal nature makes them more stable, more resilient." Harry smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that felt unfamiliar on his face. "Well, that part should be easy enough." "What part?" "Caring about them," Harry said simply, his gaze traveling around the room, taking in each redhead bent to their various tasks. "That's never been difficult." Hermione studied him for a moment, her expression soft. "No," she agreed quietly. "I don't imagine it has been." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Arthur Weasley, accompanied by Kingsley Shacklebolt and, surprisingly, Remus Lupin. "Remus!" Harry exclaimed, straightening in his chair, wincing slightly as the movement jostled his healing arm. "Hello, Harry," Lupin greeted him warmly, crossing the room to clasp Harry's good hand. "Arthur told me what happened. I came as soon as I could." "It's good to see you," Harry said sincerely. "But why am I here?" Lupin finished with a small smile. "Several reasons. First, to see for myself that you're all right. Second, to offer my services with the warding. I have some experience with protective magic. And third, his expression grew more serious, to discuss certain aspects of your parents' will that have recently come to light. My parents' will? Harry repeated, confused. I didn't know they had one. They did, Kingsley confirmed, his deep voice solemn. It was sealed after their deaths, by order of the Wisengamot, supposedly for security reasons related to you-know-who. But now that the Wisengamot has reviewed your guardianship, Arthur added, the will has been unsealed as part of the legal proceedings. Harry looked between the three men, trying to process this new information. What does it say? The will, I mean. Among other things, Lupin said gently, it explicitly stated that under no circumstances were you to be placed with Petunia and Vernon Dursley. Harry felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. What? He managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Your parents named several potential guardians, Lupin continued. Sirius, of course, was their first choice. I was listed, as were the Longbottoms, and, interestingly, the Weasleys. Us? Molly exclaimed, having emerged from the kitchen in time to hear this. But, we barely knew James and Lily. We were in the order together, certainly, but not close friends. Apparently, Kingsley said, James and Lily were impressed by your family when they met you at order gatherings. The will specifically mentions your unwavering commitment to family and love of children as qualities they valued. Molly pressed a hand to her mouth, visibly moved by this revelation. So my parents never wanted me to go to the Dursleys, Harry said slowly, trying to make sense of it all. But I was sent there anyway. Why? Who sealed the will? The three men exchanged glances. The sealing order was issued by the Wisengamot, Kingsley said carefully, at the recommendation of the chief warlock. Dumbledore, Harry realized, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Dumbledore knew my parents didn't want me with the Dursleys, and he sent me there anyway. It appears so, Lupin acknowledged, his expression troubled. When confronted with this information yesterday, he claimed it was a necessary sacrifice for your protection. But you said I could have gone to the Longbottoms, or to the Weasleys, or to you. The Longbottoms were attacked shortly after your parents, Lupin reminded him gently. They would not have been able to take you. I was deemed unsuitable due to my condition. And the Weasleys, well. We weren't even considered, Arthur said quietly. We were never informed that Lily and James had named us as potential guardians. The implications of these revelations washed over Harry in waves. His parents had made provisions for him, had specifically stated their wishes for his care, and those wishes had been deliberately ignored. The knowledge should have made him angry, and part of him was, but mostly, he felt a profound sadness. So all of it, he said finally, all those years at the Dursleys, it was never supposed to happen. No, Harry, Lupin confirmed softly. It wasn't. Harry closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this truth. When he opened them again, he was surprised to find not rage but resolution. It doesn't matter now, he said firmly. What's done is done. I can't change the past, but I can choose what happens next. He looked up at Arthur and Molly. And I choose this. I choose you all. Molly made a small, choked sound and moved to embrace him, careful of his injured arm. And we choose you, dear, she whispered fiercely. We always would have, had we known. I believe that, Harry said, and he did. Whatever mistakes had been made, whatever truths had been hidden, he was here now, surrounded by people who genuinely wanted him. That was what mattered. Now, he said, gently disengaging from Molly's embrace, what's this about the warding ceremony? As twilight settled over the Burrow, the final preparations for the warding ceremony were completed. The specialists had departed, leaving the Weasley family, Harry, Hermione, Lupin, and Kingsley to perform the crucial binding ritual that would activate the wards. They gathered in the garden, where Bill had spent hours carefully inscribing runic circles in the soft earth. 9 white stones marked key positions around the property, one for each member of the Weasley family, one for Harry, and one that Bill explained would serve as the keystone for the entire ward structure. The ritual is relatively simple, Bill explained as they took their positions. Each of us will stand at our designated stone and state our commitment to Harry's protection. The magic will do the rest, drawing on the genuine feelings behind the words to create the protective barrier. Harry stood at the center of the arrangement, feeling oddly vulnerable as everyone took their places around him. "What do I need to do?" he asked. "Just be present," Bill assured him. "Your acceptance of the protection is an essential component, but it doesn't require any special action on your part. The magic will sense your willingness." As the last light of day faded from the sky, Bill raised his wand and began the incantation, a flowing, melodic chant in a language Harry didn't recognize but felt he almost understood. The white stones began to glow softly, illuminating the faces of those standing around them. "Now," Bill instructed as he completed the initial incantation. One by one, beginning with Father. Arthur stepped forward, his face solemn in the ethereal light of the stones. He placed his hand on his designated stone and spoke clearly, "I, Arthur Weasley, offer my protection, my home, and my guidance to Harry James Potter, whom I welcome as a son. By the bonds of family freely chosen, I pledge to guard, to support, and to cherish him as my own blood." The stone beneath his hand flared brighter, and a thin strand of golden light extended from it toward Harry, gently enveloping him before sinking into his skin like sunlight being absorbed. Harry gasped at the sensation, warm and comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket on a cold day. Molly stepped forward next, tears streaming unashamedly down her face as she placed her hand on her stone. "I, Molly Weasley, offer my protection, my home, and my love to Harry James Potter, whom I have carried in my heart as a son since first I met him. By the bonds of family freely chosen, I pledge to nurture, to defend with all my strength, and to love him unconditionally for all my days." Her stone blazed even brighter than Arthur's had, and the golden strand that reached for Harry seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat before melding with him. One by one, the Weasley children followed, each offering their own pledge. Bill spoke of guardianship and wisdom, Charlie of strength and loyalty, Percy, his voice unexpectedly emotional, of guidance and steadfastness. Fred and George, for once completely serious, pledged their inventiveness and unwavering support. Ron, his ears flaming red but his voice steady, spoke of friendship and brotherhood. Ginny, the last of the Weasleys, offered her understanding and fierce protection. With each pledge, another strand of golden light joined the others surrounding Harry, and with each absorption, he felt a growing sense of security unlike anything he had ever experienced. Then, to his surprise, Hermione stepped forward to the 9th stone. "The final position," Bill explained, seeing Harry's confusion, "represents the extended bonds, those outside the immediate family who form part of the protective network." Hermione placed her hand on the stone, her voice clear and steady. "I, Hermione Granger, offer my protection, my loyalty, and my friendship to Harry James Potter, who is my first and dearest friend. By the bonds we have forged through trials and joys alike, I pledge my knowledge, my courage, and my unwavering faith in him, now and always." As her strand of light joined the others around Harry, he felt a lump form in his throat. The visible manifestation of these bonds, these connections he had formed despite everything, overwhelmed him with gratitude. "The wards are forming," Bill announced, his professional demeanor momentarily forgotten in his wonder at the magic taking shape. "Harry, can you feel them?" Harry nodded, unable to speak. He could feel the protection settling around the burrow like a living thing, responsive and alert, anchored to the 9 glowing stones and to the people who stood beside them. "There's one final step," Bill said after a moment. "The keystone must be activated to complete the ward structure." He approached the 10th stone, which stood slightly apart from the others. This stone represents the focal point of the protection, the person or place being guarded. Traditionally, it would be activated by the head of the household, but in this case. He hesitated, then looked directly at Harry. "I believe it should be you." "Me?" Harry asked, surprised. But I thought I was just receiving the protection, not providing it. That's the beauty of bond wards, Harry, Bill explained with a smile. They're reciprocal. You protect us even as we protect you. That's what makes them so powerful. Guided by Bill, Harry approached the keystone. It pulsed with a soft, white light, seemingly in rhythm with his heartbeat. Place your hand on the stone, Bill instructed, and speak from your heart. The words themselves matter less than the intention behind them. Harry took a deep breath and placed his hand on the cool, smooth surface of the stone. For a moment, he didn't speak, unsure of what to say. Then, looking around at the circle of faces illuminated by the magical light, he found the words. I, Harry James Potter, accept the protection, the home, and the love offered to me by the Weasley family and by all who stand with them. In return, his voice grew stronger, more certain, I pledge my own protection, my loyalty, and my love to each of you. By the bonds we have chosen freely, I will stand with you, fight for you, and cherish you as the family of my heart. The keystone flared with brilliant light, so intense that Harry had to close his eyes against it. When he opened them again, he gasped in awe. A dome of shimmering golden light had formed over the entire property, extending from the burrow to the orchard, encompassing the garden, the shed, and the pond. Within it, threads of light connected each person to the others, creating a complex web of protection that centered on the keystone beneath Harry's hand. For a breathless moment, the magical light remained visible, a tangible manifestation of the bonds between them all. Then, gradually, it faded from sight, sinking into the earth, the air, and the very walls of the burrow itself. Though no longer visible, Harry could still feel the wards, a comforting presence at the edge of his awareness, vigilant and steadfast. It's done, Bill announced softly, professional assessment mixing with personal awe in his voice. And they're stronger than I expected. Much stronger. Will they hold against him? Harry asked, not needing to specify who he meant. Against Voldemort himself? Bill considered the question seriously. I believe they would give even him significant difficulty. These are among the strongest bond wards I've ever encountered or even heard of. That's because they're based on genuine connections, Lupin observed, his eyes suspiciously bright. Not political alliances or convenient arrangements, but real, tested bonds. Harry looked around at the people who had just pledged themselves to his protection, the family who had risked everything to rescue him from the Dursleys, the friends who had stood by him through dangers most could not imagine. For the first time since Voldemort's return in that graveyard, he felt a flicker of hope. Thank you, he said simply, knowing the words were inadequate but unable to find better ones. All of you. No need for thanks, mate, Ron said, clapping him carefully on his uninjured shoulder. That's what family does. Family. The word no longer felt foreign to Harry, no longer represented something other people had that he could only observe from a distance. Now it was his reality, messy, complicated, wonderful, and real. As they made their way back to the burrow, the newly established wards humming contentedly around them, Harry found himself thinking again of his parents. They had wanted him to be with people who would love him, protect him, and make him feel at home. It had taken 14 years longer than it should have, but finally, their wishes had been fulfilled. Inside, Molly immediately set about preparing a celebratory dinner, declaring that wardcasting required substantial refueling. The kitchen soon filled with delicious aromas and the sounds of cheerful conversation as everyone pitched in to help, everyone except Harry, who was firmly directed to sit and rest his healing arm. You've done your part tonight, Molly insisted when he tried to offer assistance. Now let us do ours. So Harry sat at the kitchen table, watching the organized chaos with contentment. Fred and George entertained everyone with a dramatic reenactment of Vernon Dursley's face when they'd confronted him. Ron and Ginny argued good-naturedly about the proper way to set the table. Percy, having cautiously rejoined the family activities, discussed the legal implications of the bond wards with Kingsley in hushed tones. Bill and Charlie debated the finer points of the warding magic, while Arthur tinkered with what appeared to be an enchanted Muggle toaster. Hermione slipped into the chair beside Harry, following his gaze around the room. "Happy?" she asked softly. "Yeah," Harry replied, surprised to find that it was entirely true. Despite everything, the lingering pain in his arm, the revelations about his parents' will, the looming threat of Voldemort, he felt a deep, genuine happiness. "I am. You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about that title the twins came up with, about the Dursleys never seeing morning at Privet Drive again. What about it? It works for you too, doesn't it? You'll never see morning there again either. But unlike them, for you, it's a beginning, not an ending." Harry considered this, watching as Molly deftly orchestrated the dinner preparations, her wand conducting serving dishes and cookware in a culinary ballet. "A beginning," he repeated, liking the sound of it. "A new day." "Exactly," Hermione smiled. "And speaking of new days, what are you planning to do with your first full day as an official Weasley tomorrow?" "Sleep in," Harry decided immediately. "Eat an enormous breakfast. Then maybe convince Ron to play chess in the garden so I can be outside without actually doing anything strenuous enough to get me in trouble with Molly." "Sounds perfect," Hermione approved. "It does, doesn't it?" Harry agreed, a smile spreading across his face. "Completely, utterly normal. No cupboards, no chores, no counting down the days until I can escape." Hermione squeezed his hand. "Just family." "Just family," Harry echoed, the words settling into his heart like the wards had settled around the burrow, protective, nurturing, and, finally, home. As the evening progressed into night, filled with food and laughter and plans for the days ahead, Harry found himself thinking of the Dursleys one last time. They would never see morning at Privet Drive again, and neither would he. But while for them it represented punishment, for Harry, it was liberation. Tomorrow morning would dawn on the first day of the rest of his life, a life where he belonged, where he was wanted, where he was loved. And that, he decided, was the greatest magic of all. Chapter 3, The New Dawn. Harry woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a disorienting moment, he tensed, his mind automatically assuming he was back in his room at Privet Drive. Then the cheerful orange of the Chudley Cannon's posters surrounding him registered, and he relaxed back into the camp bed that had been set up in Ron's room. Not Privet Drive. The Burrow. Home. The realization still felt strange, wonderful and surreal in equal measure. He glanced over at Ron's bed, finding it empty, the covers thrown back haphazardly. Unusual for Ron to be up before him, but then again, Harry had been sleeping more than normal as his body continued to heal. He sat up carefully, testing his injured arm. The healers had been right, the bone itself was mended, but the surrounding muscles still protested if he moved too quickly. The sling helped, though it was a nuisance to sleep with. From downstairs came the familiar sounds of Weasley family morning chaos, multiple conversations happening simultaneously, the clatter of dishes, occasional laughter, and Molly's voice rising above it all, directing traffic through the kitchen. The normalcy of it all made Harry smile. He dressed slowly, still getting used to managing the sling, then made his way downstairs to join the others. "Harry." Molly greeted him warmly as he entered the kitchen. "I was just about to send Ron up to check on you. How did you sleep, dear?" "Really well," Harry answered truthfully. Between the comfort of the burrow, the security of the new wards, and his still healing body's demands, he'd slept more soundly than he could remember doing in ages. "Excellent. Sit down and I'll fix you a plate. You need a proper breakfast to help with your recovery." Harry slid into a seat at the crowded kitchen table between Ron and Ginny. Fred and George sat across from them, heads bent together over what appeared to be order forms for their joke products. Percy was absent, presumably already at work at the ministry, while Arthur sat at the head of the table, reading the Daily Prophet with a slight frown. "Morning, mate," Ron greeted through a mouthful of eggs. "Sleep all right?" "Brilliantly," Harry confirmed. "What time is it anyway?" "Nearly 10, Ginny informed him. Mum wouldn't let anyone wake you." You needed the rest, Molly said firmly, setting a heaping plate in front of Harry. And you'll need your strength today. Bill and Charlie are coming by to check the wards, and Remus is stopping in as well. Harry nodded his thanks for both the food and the information, suddenly realizing how hungry he was. As he ate, he listened to the familiar morning banter of the Weasley family. Fred and George were debating the merits of different suppliers for potion ingredients, with occasional input from their father. Ron was telling Ginny about a spectacular save by the Chudley Cannon's keeper in a recent match, gesturing enthusiastically with his fork. It was all so normal. So different from the tense silences or Vernon's complaints about his work that had characterized breakfasts at Privet Drive. Here, Harry wasn't an unwelcome intruder but a welcome participant. "Harry, dear," Molly said, refilling his juice glass, "don't forget your morning potion. The blue one with breakfast, remember?" "Right," Harry said, reaching for the small vial beside his plate. He uncorked it and swallowed the contents quickly, grimacing slightly at the taste. "Nasty stuff, isn't it?" Ron sympathized. "At least it's working though. You look loads better than you did at St. Mungo's." "Thanks," Harry said dryly. "Always good to know I looked terrible before." "That's not what Ron began, then caught Harry's grin. "Oh, shut it, you know what I meant." Arthur lowered his newspaper, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Harry, I wanted to let you know that I've arranged to collect your things from Privet Drive this afternoon." Harry paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "My things?" "Yes. Your trunk, your broomstick, anything else that belongs to you. The house has been secured since that night, but the ministry is releasing it back to the Dursleys' extended family today. I thought you'd want your possessions before that happens." Harry hadn't even thought about the fact that his trunk, with all his Hogwarts supplies, was still at Privet Drive. The realization that he would never have to return there himself, not even to collect his belongings, struck him anew. "That would be great," he said. "Thanks, Mr. Weasley, Arthur," he corrected himself, still getting used to the less formal address that both Weasley parents had insisted upon. "I'll come with you," Ron offered immediately. "Actually," Arthur said gently, "I thought perhaps Bill might accompany me. He can check for any remaining traces of those suppression items while we're there." Harry nodded, relieved that he wouldn't have to ask not to go himself. The idea of seeing Privet Drive again, even briefly, held no appeal. "There's one more thing," Arthur continued, folding his newspaper and setting it aside. "Dumbledore has requested to speak with you again. At your convenience," he added quickly. "There's no rush." Harry's immediate instinct was to refuse. His conversation with Dumbledore at St. Mungo's had provided some answers, but it had also opened new questions, particularly about the sealing of his parents' will. Yet even as the impulse to avoid the conversation rose, Harry felt a surprising counter-sentiment, a desire to face it head-on. "It's fine," he said after a moment. "I'll see him today, if he can come." Arthur studied him carefully. "Are you sure? No one would blame you if you needed more time." "I'm sure," Harry said firmly. "Better to get it over with." "All right then. I'll send him an owl after breakfast." The conversation shifted to other topics as they finished their meal. Fred and George announced their intention to work on product development in their room, extracting a promise from Molly that she would knock before entering. Ginny had plans to meet Luna Lovegood in the village. Ron, mindful of Harry's need for rest, suggested a game of chess in the garden. "Excellent idea," Molly approved. "Fresh air will do you good, Harry, though mind you stay in the shade. Your potions can make your skin more sensitive to sunlight." As they cleared the breakfast dishes, Harry insisting on helping despite Molly's protests that he should rest, a sense of contentment settled over him. The routine domesticity of it all, the easy inclusion in family activities, the genuine concern for his welfare, it was everything he had ever wanted. Yet beneath the contentment lay a current of something else, an awareness that this new reality was still fragile, still forming. His place in the family wasn't yet as natural as it felt, there would be adjustments on all sides. And beyond the safety of the Burrow, larger questions loomed. Voldemort was still out there, growing stronger. The magical world still refused to acknowledge his return. And Dumbledore. Harry shook his head slightly, pushing those thoughts aside for now. There would be time enough to face the larger challenges. For this moment, he would simply enjoy the morning, his first proper morning as part of the Weasley family. The chess game in the garden proved to be exactly what Harry needed. Seated in comfortable chairs beneath the shade of a large apple tree, with a gentle summer breeze rustling the leaves above them, Harry found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't been able to since before the Triwizard Tournament. Ron, of course, was thoroughly trouncing him. "Check," Ron announced, directing his knight to threaten Harry's king. "You're not even trying today, mate." "I am," Harry protested mildly, moving his king out of danger. "You're just unnaturally good at this game." Ron grinned, not bothering to deny it as he contemplated his next move. "It's nice, isn't it?" he said after a moment, gesturing vaguely around them. "You being here properly, I mean. Not just for a visit." "Yeah," Harry agreed, surprised by Ron's uncharacteristic directness about emotional matters. "It really is." Ron moved his bishop, capturing one of Harry's few remaining pawns. "I always hated when you had to go back to those muggles," he admitted, his eyes fixed on the chessboard. "Especially after seeing how they treated you that time with the flying car." "Me too," Harry said quietly. "I'd start dreading it about halfway through the school year, counting down the days." "Well, you don't have to count anymore," Ron said firmly. "This is where you belong. Always have, really." The simple assertion, delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty, hit Harry harder than he expected. He blinked rapidly, focusing intently on the chessboard to hide the sudden emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "Your move, Harry," Ron prompted after a moment, kindly pretending not to notice Harry's reaction. Harry nodded gratefully, moving a piece almost at random. They played in companionable silence for a while, the inevitable outcome of the game a foregone conclusion but neither of them particularly caring. As Ron was setting up his final attack, Bill and Charlie arrived, operating into the garden with twin cracks. "Morning, you two," Bill greeted them cheerfully. "How's the arm, Harry?" "Better," Harry replied, welcoming the distraction from the chess game's imminent conclusion. "Still sore, but definitely healing." "Good to hear. We're here to check on the wards, make sure they're settling properly." "Do they need checking?" Harry asked curiously. "I thought once they were established, they just worked." "Normally, yes," Charlie explained, crouching down to examine an area where one of the white stones had been placed the previous night. "But bond wards are somewhat unique. They're living magic, in a sense, they grow and adapt based on the relationships they're founded on. Which means," Bill added, "they can sometimes develop in unexpected ways, especially in the first few days. Best to monitor them closely at first, make sure they're stable." Harry watched as the two older Weasleys moved around the garden, casting complex diagnostic spells and occasionally making notes on a small piece of parchment. There was something comforting about their professional competence, the easy way they worked together without needing many words. "Checkmate," Ron announced, bringing Harry's attention back to the chess game. His king threw down its crown in defeat, the tiny piece making a dramatic show of its surrender. "Well played," Harry conceded, not particularly bothered by the loss. "Rematch later?" "Definitely," Ron agreed. He began resetting the pieces, then paused, looking up at the sky. "Owl coming." Harry followed his gaze to see a majestic tawny owl circling down toward them, a letter clutched in its talons. It landed gracefully on the table beside the chessboard, extending its leg to Harry. "That's a Hogwarts owl," Ron observed as Harry untied the letter. The parchment bore Dumbledore's flowing script, responding to Arthur's message about meeting. The headmaster proposed visiting that afternoon if convenient, expressing his hope for a candid conversation. "Dumbledore's coming this afternoon," Harry informed Ron, folding the letter and tucking it into his pocket. Ron's expression grew serious. "You sure you're up for that?" "Not really," Harry admitted. "But it needs to happen." "Want me to stick around?" "I could, actually," Harry interrupted gently. "I think I need to do this one alone." "But thanks." Ron nodded, understanding without offense. "Just yell if you need backup." Fred and George have been working on some brilliant new defensive products they'd probably love to test on a powerful wizard. Harry laughed, appreciating the offer for what it was, Ron's way of saying he had Harry's back, no matter what. "I'll keep that in mind," he promised. Their conversation was interrupted by Bill's voice, calling from the edge of the property. "Harry! Could you come over here for a moment? There's something you should see." Harry and Ron exchanged curious glances before heading toward where Bill stood, his wand tracing complex patterns in the air before him. "What is it?" Harry asked as they approached. "Something unexpected," Bill replied, though his tone suggested intrigue rather than concern. "The wards are developing a unique configuration I've never seen before." He gestured for Harry to stand beside him, then cast a revealing charm. The air before them shimmered, and suddenly Harry could see what had caught Bill's attention. The protective dome they had witnessed during the warding ceremony was still there, shimmering faintly around the property. But now, delicate threads of gold extended outward from it, stretching away toward the horizon in various directions. "What are those?" Harry asked, reaching out instinctively before stopping himself. "Connections," Bill explained, genuine wonder in his voice. "The wards are extending filaments to other locations, other people connected to you." "Is that normal?" "Not exactly," Bill admitted. Bond wards typically remain centered on a single location. "But these." He gestured at the golden threads, "These are reaching out, establishing secondary protections." Harry studied the shimmering strands, fascinated. "Where do they go?" "That's what's truly remarkable," Bill said. "Based on their directions and magical signatures, I believe they're connecting to other places important to you. There," he pointed to a particularly strong strand heading northeast, "that one's almost certainly going to Hogwarts. And that one," indicating another prominent thread, "appears to be reaching toward London. Possibly Grimmauld Place, where Sirius is." "They're protecting other places I care about?" Harry asked, amazed. "Not quite protecting," Charlie corrected, joining them. "More like, establishing awareness. If you were in danger at one of those locations, the wards here would know, and vice versa. It's a network of magical communication more than extended protection." "I've never seen anything like it," Bill admitted. "But then, bond wards are rare to begin with, and the circumstances here are, well, unique." "You mean because of me," Harry said flatly. "Because I'm the boy who lived, or whatever." "Actually, no," Bill surprised him by saying. "This has nothing to do with your fame or your history with you-know-who. It's about the strength and number of genuine connections you've formed despite everything you've been through. Most people, magical or muggle, go through life with only a handful of truly deep bonds. You, Harry, have formed many, and remarkably powerful ones at that." Harry didn't know how to respond to that. It had never occurred to him that his friendships, his relationships with people like Sirius, Lupin, and the Weasleys, might be unusual in their strength or number. "So is it a problem?" he asked after a moment. "These connections?" "Not at all," Bill assured him. "If anything, they strengthen the overall ward structure. I just wanted you to see them, to understand what's happening. The magic is responding to who you are, Harry, not the boy who lived, but just Harry. The person who has touched so many lives." The simple statement, delivered without drama or emphasis, affected Harry deeply. All his life, his identity had been defined by things beyond his control, his parents' murder, his scar, his unwanted fame. The idea that these magical connections were forming based on who he was as a person, on the relationships he had built through his own choices and actions, felt profoundly validating. "Thanks for showing me," he said quietly. Bill nodded, understanding the deeper significance of Harry's reaction. They'll continue to develop over the next few weeks. I'll teach you how to see them yourself, if you'd like. I would, Harry confirmed. Definitely. As they headed back toward the house, Harry found himself glancing back at the invisible threads that connected the Burrow to other places he cared about. There was something deeply comforting about the knowledge that even when he eventually returned to Hogwarts, a part of him would remain connected to this place, to home. The remainder of the morning passed quietly. Charlie departed to meet with a colleague who specialized in magical creatures. Nothing dangerous this time, Mum, I promise, while Bill stayed to continue monitoring the wards. Ron and Harry moved their chess game indoors when the day grew warmer, setting up in the living room where Harry could stretch out on the sofa to rest his arm. After lunch, Arthur and Bill left for Privet Drive to collect Harry's belongings, assuring him they would be back well before Dumbledore's scheduled arrival. Hermione arrived shortly after, having spent the morning helping her parents at their dental practice. "How are you feeling today?" she asked Harry, settling into an armchair with a stack of books she had brought. "Better," Harry said, the response becoming automatic after being asked so frequently. "The arm's still sore, but the headaches are gone." "And emotionally?" Hermione pressed gently, never one to settle for surface answers. Harry considered the question seriously. "Honestly? It's still sinking in. Everything happened so fast, the rescue, the hospital, the guardianship change, the wards. Sometimes it feels like I might wake up and find myself back at Privet Drive." Hermione's expression softened. "That's completely normal, Harry. Major life changes take time to process, even positive ones." "I know," he acknowledged. "And it helps being here, seeing everyone just, including me in things. Like it's the most natural thing in the world." "Because it is," Ron interjected from where he was arranging the chess pieces for yet another match. "You've always been part of the family, mate. Now it's just official." Harry smiled at the simple certainty in Ron's voice. "Yeah. I guess it is." "Speaking of official," Hermione said, pulling a book from her stack, "I've been researching magical adoption rituals, and there's something interesting I thought you might want to know about." "Hermione," Ron groaned, "he's been here officially for less than 2 days. Maybe give him a chance to settle in before throwing more magical rituals at him." "It's okay," Harry assured him. "What did you find, Hermione?" She opened the book to a marked page. "Well, the guardianship established by the Wisengamot is legally binding and completely valid. But there's also an older tradition of magical family adoption that goes beyond legal guardianship. It's more symbolic, really, but with magical significance." "What kind of significance?" Harry asked, genuinely curious. "It's a ritual that acknowledges the formation of family bonds not based on blood," she explained. "It doesn't change your identity or your heritage. You'd still be Harry Potter, son of James and Lily, but it would recognize the Weasleys as your family in magic as well as law." "Sounds a bit like the ward ritual," Harry observed. "Similar principles," Hermione agreed. "Actually, the bond wards you've established would make the adoption ritual even more powerful, if you ever decided to pursue it." "Is it complicated?" Harry asked. "The ritual, I mean." "Not particularly. It's more about intent than complex spellwork. But," she added quickly, "there's absolutely no rush. It's just something to be aware of, for the future." Harry nodded, filing the information away. It was too soon to think about yet another ritual, but the idea held appeal, a formal magical acknowledgement of what he was already beginning to feel, that he had found his true family. The afternoon continued peacefully. Hermione read contentedly while Harry and Ron played chess. Molly bustled in and out, bringing snacks and checking on Harry's comfort level with motherly concern. Fred and George emerged briefly from their room, trailing multicolored smoke and looking singed but satisfied with whatever experiment they had been conducting. It was, Harry reflected, exactly the kind of ordinary afternoon he had never been allowed at Privet Drive, quiet, comfortable, surrounded by people who wanted him there. Arthur and Bill returned around 3 o'clock, levitating Harry's trunk and Hedwig's empty cage before them. Hedwig herself was still recovering at the Burrow, her injured wing healing well under Molly's care. "Got everything," Arthur announced cheerfully. "Your school trunk, your broomstick, and we found these under the loose floorboard." He handed Harry a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Harry unwrapped it to find the photo album Hagrid had given him, containing pictures of his parents, along with several letters from Sirius and a few other small treasures he had hidden from the Dursleys. "Thanks," he said sincerely, clutching the album to his chest. "I didn't even think about these being left behind." "We were thorough," Bill assured him. "And we found no traces of any additional suppression items, which is good news." "How was the house?" Harry asked, not entirely sure why he cared. "Empty," Arthur replied simply. "The Dursleys' things are still there, furniture, clothes, photographs, but without people, it felt rather hollow." Harry nodded, understanding perfectly. Privet Drive had always been hollow to him, regardless of how many people occupied it. It had never been a home, only a house where he was forced to stay. "Dudley's aunt is taking possession today," Arthur continued. "Apparently she plans to sell it. The Dursleys themselves have been relocated to a town called Runcorn, according to Kingsley." "Good," Harry said firmly. "I hope they're miserable there." "Harry!" Hermione admonished gently. "What? After everything they did?" Harry defended himself. "I'm not wishing them dead or anything. Just, unhappy. They deserve that much." "Maybe they do," Hermione conceded. "But harboring resentment hurts you more than it hurts them." "She's not wrong, mate," Ron said unexpectedly. "Not that I wouldn't happily hex them into next week if I got the chance," he added quickly. "But you're free of them now. Don't let them take up space in your head rent-free." Harry stared at him in surprise. "That's, actually pretty wise, Ron." Ron's ears turned pink. "Yeah, well, even I have my moments." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime that sounded throughout the house, a notification from the new wards that someone was approaching. "That'll be Dumbledore," Arthur said, glancing at the family clock. Sure enough, his own hand moved briefly to "meeting a visitor" before returning to "home." Harry felt a sudden flutter of nerves. Despite having agreed to the meeting, he wasn't entirely sure what he wanted to say to Dumbledore, or what he needed to hear from the headmaster. "We'll give you privacy," Hermione said, already gathering her books. "Unless you prefer us to stay." "No, it's okay," Harry assured her, though part of him wanted the support. "I need to do this alone." Ron and Hermione nodded, respecting his decision. Arthur went to greet Dumbledore at the boundary of the wards, while Bill tactfully disappeared upstairs. Molly poked her head in from the kitchen. "Would you like me to bring tea for your meeting with Professor Dumbledore?" she offered. "Yes, please," Harry accepted, feeling oddly formal. "Thank you." As the others cleared out, Harry moved from the sofa to a more upright chair, not wanting to appear too casual or vulnerable for the conversation ahead. He ran his hand through his perpetually messy hair in a futile attempt to neaten it, then straightened his glasses and adjusted his sling. Arthur returned, Dumbledore following behind him. The headmaster looked much as he always did, resplendent in midnight blue robes embroidered with silver stars, his long white beard neatly groomed. Yet there was a subtle weariness to his bearing that Harry hadn't noticed at St. Mungo's, a slight dimming of the customary twinkle in his blue eyes. "Harry," Dumbledore greeted him warmly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. You're looking much improved." "Professor," Harry acknowledged with a nod. "Please, sit down." Dumbledore took the offered seat, while Arthur excused himself, promising to be within calling distance should Harry need anything. Molly arrived with a tea tray, which she set on the small table between them before quietly withdrawing. For a moment, neither spoke. Harry busied himself pouring the tea, using the task to gather his thoughts. "I must say," Dumbledore finally broke the silence, "the new wards around the Burrow are quite remarkable. Some of the finest bond-based protection I have ever encountered. Bill says they're still developing, Harry replied, handing Dumbledore a cup. Growing connections to other places. Yes, I noticed the filament extending toward Hogwarts, Dumbledore nodded. Fascinating magic. And far more suitable to your circumstances than the blood protection, as events have proven. Harry recognized the opening Dumbledore was providing, acknowledgement of his error in insisting on the blood wards. But Harry wasn't ready to discuss that yet. There was a more fundamental question he needed answered first. Why did you seal my parents' will? He asked directly. Dumbledore sighed deeply, setting his teacup down untouched. I expected this question, he said quietly. And you deserve an honest answer. Yes, Harry agreed firmly. I do. Dumbledore studied him for a moment, his blue eyes grave. I sealed the will, Harry, because at the time, I believed it was necessary to ensure your safety. The blood protection offered by your mother's sacrifice was, as far as I knew, the strongest possible shield against Voldemort and his followers. The will's provisions would have placed you elsewhere. With Sirius, or the Longbottoms, or Remus, or even the Weasleys, Harry recited. All of whom my parents trusted. All of whom would have loved me. Yes, Dumbledore acknowledged. They would have. But none could have provided the specific protection that your mother's blood sacrifice enabled. Or so I believed at the time. So you decided that protection was more important than my parents' wishes? More important than my happiness? I made a calculation, Dumbledore admitted, his voice heavy with regret. A cold, logical assessment that your physical safety outweighed other considerations. I believed, truly believed, that without the blood protection, you would be in mortal danger from Voldemort's followers, many of whom remained at large and desperate for vengeance. But the Weasleys were listed in the will, Harry pressed. They could have taken me in, and you could have established other protections. Like these bond wards. Bond wards were not well understood at that time, Dumbledore explained. They had fallen out of favor centuries ago, replaced by supposedly more reliable forms of protection. It is only in recent years that they have been rediscovered and their true potential recognized. Harry absorbed this, trying to separate reasonable explanation from excuse. So you didn't know about them then? I knew of their existence, Dumbledore clarified, but not of their full capability. I considered them an interesting but unreliable alternative to the certainty offered by blood protection. Even though that certainty meant leaving me with people who hated magic. Who hated me? Dumbledore winced visibly at the direct accusation. I did not anticipate the extent of their animosity, he said quietly. I knew Petunia had resented her sister's abilities, but I believed, hoped, perhaps, that her blood connection to Lily would overcome that resentment when faced with her orphan nephew. Well, it didn't, Harry said flatly. She hated me from the moment I arrived on her doorstep, and so did Vernon. They spent 10 years trying to stamp the magic out of me, as they put it. And then when that didn't work, they got those suppression items to do it magically. Yes, Dumbledore's voice grew even heavier. The suppression items. That is another matter entirely, and one for which I have no excuse. I did not know, could not have anticipated, that your uncle would go to such lengths. Who helped him? Harry asked, the question that had been bothering him since learning of the suppression. Who gave him those items? We don't yet know with certainty, Dumbledore admitted. The investigation is ongoing. The items themselves were obtained through a black market dealer known to operate in both magical and muggle worlds. We are attempting to trace them back to their source. Harry nodded, accepting the answer for now, though the question still troubled him deeply. The idea that someone magical had actively aided the Dursleys in their efforts to suppress his abilities felt like a betrayal beyond even what his relatives had done. There's something else I need to understand, Harry said after a moment. When I came to Hogwarts, when you saw me, didn't you notice something was wrong? I was small for my age, underweight. I flinched when people moved too quickly around me. I never got letters or packages from home like the other kids. Weren't those signs? Dumbledore's eyes closed briefly, genuine pain crossing his aged face. They were, he acknowledged. And I did notice them, Harry. I discussed my concerns with Minerva more than once. But you still sent me back there. Every summer. I did, Dumbledore confirmed. And that may be my greatest failure where you are concerned. I convinced myself that what I observed was neglect rather than abuse, regrettable but not dangerous. I told myself that the blood protection outweighed the unpleasantness of your summers. I was wrong. The simple admission, I was wrong, from a man widely regarded as the greatest wizard of the age, struck Harry powerfully. Dumbledore had always seemed infallible, all-knowing. To hear him acknowledge such a fundamental error in judgment was both jarring and strangely vindicating. Yes, Harry said quietly. You were. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of that acknowledgement hanging in the air between them. Harry sipped his tea, trying to sort through the complex emotions the conversation was stirring. I want to be clear about something, Harry, Dumbledore finally said. My failures in judgment regarding your placement with the Dursleys in no way diminish my respect and admiration for you. If anything, seeing what you have overcome, not just Voldemort's attacks but the cruelty of those who should have cared for you, only increases my esteem. I don't want your admiration, Harry said bluntly. I want. He trailed off, realizing he wasn't entirely sure what he wanted from Dumbledore now. What do you want, Harry? Dumbledore prompted gently. Harry considered the question seriously. Honesty, he decided after a moment. Complete honesty, moving forward. No more secrets, for my own good. No more decisions about my life made without my input. Dumbledore nodded slowly. A reasonable request, and one I shall endeavor to honor. Though I must add a caveat, there may be information that I cannot share not because I wish to keep it from you, but because I do not yet possess it myself. Fair enough, Harry conceded. But when you do know things that affect me, I want to know them too. Agreed, Dumbledore said solemnly. And in that spirit of honesty, there is something I believe you should know. Harry tensed slightly, bracing himself for whatever revelation was coming. The connection between you and Voldemort, Dumbledore began carefully, the one evidenced by your scar and the visions you have sometimes experienced. I have reason to believe it may grow stronger now that he has returned in physical form. Harry unconsciously touched his scar, which had indeed prickled uncomfortably several times since that night in the graveyard. What does that mean? He asked. For me. It means, Dumbledore said gravely, that you may experience more visions, more glimpses into his mind and emotions. And potentially, though this is only conjecture at this point, he may eventually become aware of the connection from his side. You mean he could see into my mind? Harry asked, alarmed. It is a possibility we should prepare for, Dumbledore confirmed. Which is why I would like to arrange for you to receive instruction in occlumency, the magical defense of the mind against external penetration. Who would teach me? Ideally, someone highly skilled in both occlumency and legilimency, its counterpart, the ability to navigate and interpret the layers of another's mind. There are few such practitioners. Professor Snape is one. I myself am another. Harry's immediate instinct was to reject the idea of letting Snape anywhere near his mind. Could you teach me? He asked. Or someone else? Anyone else? Dumbledore's lips twitched slightly, suggesting he understood perfectly Harry's reluctance to work with Severus. I had considered teaching you myself, he admitted. However, there is a concern that too close a mental connection between us might actually provide Voldemort with a pathway to my mind through yours. It is a risk I am reluctant to take. So Snape is the only option? Harry asked, unable to keep the dismay from his voice. Perhaps not, Dumbledore said thoughtfully. There is another possibility, Bill Weasley. Bill? Harry repeated in surprise. He knows occlumency. Indeed. Cursebreakers often train in mental arts as protection against the mind-affecting traps frequently found in ancient tombs. While he may not be as advanced a practitioner as Severus or myself, he is certainly skilled enough to begin your training. The suggestion immediately appealed to Harry. He liked and respected Bill, and the idea of working with him rather than Snape made the prospect of a clemency training far more palatable. "I'd prefer that," he said. "If Bill is willing. I shall discuss it with him," Dumbledore promised. "And with your new guardians, of course." The reference to the Weasleys as his guardians still gave Harry a small thrill of happiness, despite the serious nature of their conversation. "There's something else I've been wondering about," Harry said, changing the subject slightly. "The blood protection, is it completely gone now? Since I won't be going back to the Dursleys." "Not entirely," Dumbledore replied, surprising him. "The protection your mother bestowed through her sacrifice exists within you, Harry, independent of your aunt's blood connection. What living with Petunia provided was a renewal and strengthening of that protection. Without that annual renewal, the protection will gradually fade, but it has not disappeared overnight. And these new wards," Harry gestured around them, indicating the bond protections, "they're different?" "Very different," Dumbledore confirmed. "The blood protection was specifically effective against Voldemort himself, due to the nature of your mother's sacrifice. These new wards provide more general protection against a wider range of threats, and importantly, they grow stronger rather than weaker over time, as the bonds they are based on deepen." Harry nodded, finding a certain poetic rightness to the distinction. Protection based on love freely given, growing stronger as those relationships developed, seemed a fitting contrast to the reluctant, diminishing protection provided by his mother's unwilling sister. "I have one last question," Harry said, setting down his teacup. "What happens now? With Voldemort back but the Ministry denying it? With me here instead of at Privet Drive?" Dumbledore sighed deeply. A complex question with no simple answer. "Regarding Voldemort, the Order of the Phoenix has been reactivated, a secret society dedicated to opposing him, as we did during the First War. Arthur and Molly are members, as are Bill, Charlie, and, despite our recent disagreements, Percy." "And me?" Harry asked. "What's my role in all of this?" "For now," Dumbledore said firmly, "your role is to heal, both physically and emotionally, from the ordeals you have endured. To enjoy what remains of your summer with your new family. To prepare for your OWL year at Hogwarts. And later?" "Later," Dumbledore acknowledged, "we will need to address your unique position in this conflict. There are matters concerning the connection between you and Voldemort that we must explore. But not today, Harry. Not when you are still recovering." Harry wanted to press for more information but found himself accepting Dumbledore's deferral. The conversation had already covered significant emotional ground, and he felt suddenly tired, his healing body reminding him of its limitations. "All right," he agreed. "But we will talk about it. Soon." "We will," Dumbledore promised. "And in accordance with our new agreement, I will share what information I can, when I can." He rose from his chair, straightening his robes with a practiced gesture. "Thank you, Harry, for seeing me today. For what it's worth, I believe James and Lily would be deeply pleased to see you here, with the Weasleys. They valued few things more highly than the kind of love and acceptance you have found in this home." The mention of his parents brought a lump to Harry's throat. "I hope so," he managed. "I know so," Dumbledore said with quiet certainty. He moved toward the door, then paused. "One last thing. The bond wards here are truly remarkable, but I have taken the liberty of adding an additional layer of protection, one that connects these wards to Hogwarts itself. Should you ever be in grave danger here, the castle's ancient defenses will respond." "You can do that?" Harry asked, surprised. "As headmaster, I have certain privileges regarding the castle's magic," Dumbledore explained with a small smile. "Consider it a small contribution to your safety, and perhaps a first step toward making amends for past mistakes." With that, he departed, leaving Harry alone with his thoughts. The conversation had been difficult but necessary, clearing the air of unspoken recriminations and establishing a new, more honest foundation for their relationship moving forward. Harry remained in his chair for some time, processing everything that had been said. He didn't hate Dumbledore, couldn't hate the man who had introduced him to the magical world, who had shown him kindness and guidance despite his errors in judgment. But things had changed between them. The unquestioning trust Harry had once placed in the headmaster had been replaced by something more measured, more mature. Perhaps, he reflected, that was not entirely a bad thing. The days that followed took on a pleasant rhythm. Harry's arm continued to heal, and with it, his overall strength returned. The daily potions became less necessary, until finally, a week after his arrival at the Burrow, Healer Abernathy pronounced him fully recovered during his follow-up appointment at St. Mungo's. "The bone has healed beautifully," she declared after a thorough examination. "And your magical levels have not only returned to normal but actually appear slightly elevated compared to your previous records. Is that because of the suppression being removed?" Harry asked. "Most likely," the healer confirmed. "Think of it like a spring that's been compressed for years and is now free to extend to its natural length. Your magic is finding its true level." The news was welcome, though Harry had already noticed changes in his spellcasting. Simple charms seemed to come more easily, requiring less concentration and producing stronger effects. Even wandless magic, something he had only ever done accidentally before, now occasionally responded to his deliberate intent, especially when his emotions were heightened. Life at the Burrow settled into a comfortable pattern. Mornings were for chores and studies. Hermione had instituted a reasonable OWL preparation schedule that even Ron only complained about moderately. Afternoons were often spent playing modified Quidditch in the orchard, with Harry finally allowed back on a broomstick, swimming in the pond, or exploring the surrounding countryside. Evenings were Harry's favorite time. The entire family would gather for dinner, a boisterous affair full of overlapping conversations and good-natured arguments. Even Percy, though still stiffly formal at times, had begun joining them regularly, his earlier estrangement healing as he privately acknowledged the Ministry's wrong-headedness regarding Voldemort's return. After dinner, they would often gather in the living room. Arthur might tinker with a Muggle appliance while Molly knitted. The twins would conspire in the corner, occasionally testing products on a willing, or unwilling, Ron. Bill, when he was there, would regale them with sanitized versions of his curse-breaking adventures. Charlie's occasional visits brought tales of dragons and their handlers. Through it all, Harry found himself watching, absorbing, learning what it meant to be part of a real family. The easy affection, the unspoken understanding, the comfortable silences, all were new to him, yet increasingly natural as days passed. 2 weeks after his arrival, Molly approached him as he was helping clear the breakfast dishes, a somewhat nervous expression on her face. "Harry, dear," she began, "Arthur and I have been thinking. We know your bedroom situation is temporary, with you on that camp bed in Ron's room." "It's fine, really," Harry assured her quickly. "I don't mind sharing with Ron. We know that, but—" She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Well, we thought you might like a room of your own. Somewhere that's properly yours, not just a place you're staying." Harry stared at her, momentarily speechless. The concept of having his own room, a real room, not a cupboard or Dudley's cast-off second bedroom, was so unexpected that he couldn't immediately process it. "There's that small room off the landing," Molly continued, misinterpreting his silence as reluctance. "It's been used for storage, but it has a lovely window overlooking the orchard, and with a bit of work, it could be quite nice." "But of course, if you prefer staying with Ron—" "No," Harry interrupted, finding his voice. "I mean, yes. I'd like that. A room of my own. If it's not too much trouble." Molly's face broke into a warm smile. "No trouble at all, dear. Actually, the boys have already started clearing it out. They wanted it to be a surprise, but I thought you might want some input on how it's set up." As if on cue, a crash sounded from upstairs, followed by Fred's voice calling down, "Everything's fine." Completely under control. That bookcase was ugly anyway. Harry couldn't help laughing, both at the familiar chaos and at the realization that the entire family had been secretly working to create a space just for him. "Thank you," he said sincerely, unexpectedly moved. It means a lot." "Well," Molly said briskly, though her eyes were suspiciously bright, "it's only right. Every member of this family should have their own space, however modest. Every member of this family." The phrase echoed in Harry's mind as he followed her upstairs to inspect his future bedroom. Not a guest, not a visitor, but a member of the family. The reality of his new situation continued to unfold in these small, meaningful ways that touched him more deeply than grand gestures ever could. The room itself was indeed small but full of potential. Ron, Fred, George, and Ginny were in the process of clearing out old furniture and boxes, arguing good-naturedly about the best arrangement for the limited space. "Harry!" Ron exclaimed upon seeing him. "Mum told you, then? So much for the surprise." "I thought he might want some say in his own room," Molly explained reasonably. "We were thinking Quidditch posters here," Fred said, gesturing to one wall. "And a proper desk by the window," George added. "For homework and such." "The bed would fit best against that wall," Ginny suggested. "Then there's space for a wardrobe opposite." Harry stood in the doorway, taking it all in, not just the physical space but what it represented. These people, this family, were creating a place for him that was meant to be permanent. Not a temporary accommodation until he could be sent back to the Dursleys, but a room that would remain his even when he was away at Hogwarts. A place to return to. A home. "What do you think, Harry?" Molly prompted gently. "Any particular color you'd like for the walls?" Harry considered the question seriously. The bedroom at Privet Drive had been painted a dull beige, like everything else in that aggressively normal house. He wanted something different, something that reflected who he was. "Could it be blue?" he asked after a moment. "A deep blue, like the sky at dusk." "Of course," Molly agreed immediately. "That would be lovely. Arthur is quite good with color-changing charms, he can handle that part this evening." Planning for Harry's room occupied much of the day, with various Weasleys offering suggestions and assistance. By evening, the space had been cleared, cleaned, and prepared for furnishing. Arthur arrived home from the ministry and, after dinner, performed the promised color charms, transforming the walls from their previous faded yellow to a rich, deep blue that immediately made the room feel both larger and cozier. "Now for furniture," Arthur announced. "We've got a bed frame in the shed that Bill has already adjusted to fit the space. And I believe the twins found a suitable wardrobe in the attic." "Slightly gnome-chewed on one corner," Fred confirmed, "but nothing a good repair charm won't fix." "And we've got a surprise," George added with a mysterious grin. "But that's for tomorrow." By bedtime, the room had taken shape. The furniture, though clearly second-hand, had been carefully repaired and polished. Molly had contributed freshly laundered bed linens in navy and gold, while Ginny had unearthed a small bedside lamp that cast a warm, golden glow. Ron had donated several Chudley Cannon's posters, which now brightened one wall with their vivid orange. "It's already brilliant," Harry said, surveying the room with genuine pleasure. "I don't know how to thank you all." "No need for thanks," Arthur assured him. "This is your home now, Harry. Your room is just a part of that." That night, Harry slept in Ron's room for what would be the last time as a regular arrangement. As he drifted toward sleep, he found himself anticipating the next day with an excitement he hadn't felt since his first night at Hogwarts. A room of his own, in a home where he was wanted. It was something he had stopped wishing for long ago, believing it an impossible dream. The following morning brought the promised surprise from Fred and George. After breakfast, they led Harry to his new room with exaggerated ceremony, insisting he close his eyes for the final approach. "Ready?" Fred asked as they positioned him in the doorway. "Open them, now." Harry opened his eyes to find his room transformed by a stunning addition. The ceiling, which had been plain white the night before, now displayed a breathtaking enchantment. Stars glimmered against the deep blue background, constellations shifting slowly as he watched. A crescent moon hung in one corner, casting a soft, silvery light. "It's our own version of the Great Hall ceiling," George explained proudly. "Not as advanced, of course, it doesn't reflect the actual sky outside, but we thought you might like having the night sky to fall asleep under." "We know you like flying," Fred added. "This is the next best thing to sleeping under the stars." Harry stared upward, genuinely awestruck by both the magic itself and the thoughtfulness behind it. "It's incredible," he said sincerely. "How did you do it?" "Trade secret," George winked. "But let's just say we've been working on environmental charms for some of our product lines." "Do you really like it?" Fred asked, a rare hint of uncertainty in his voice. "We can adjust the brightness or the movement if it's too distracting." "I love it," Harry assured them. "It's perfect." "Thank you." The twins grinned, pleased with his reaction. "There's one more feature," George added, pulling out his wand. "Nox Pacificus." Immediately, the enchanted sky darkened slightly, and a gentle, soothing hum filled the room, like a distant lullaby. "Sleep charm," Fred explained. "For nights when rest doesn't come easily." The thoughtfulness of the addition struck Harry deeply. The twins, for all their joking manner, had recognized something he rarely discussed: his frequent difficulty sleeping, the nightmares that had plagued him even before Cedric's death and Voldemort's return. "That's... Thank you," he managed, his voice slightly hoarse with unexpected emotion. "Don't mention it," George said casually, though his eyes reflected understanding. "Really, don't mention it to Mum. She's still not entirely supportive of our product development." Harry laughed, grateful for the lightning of the moment. "Your secret's safe with me." With his room complete, Harry spent the afternoon arranging his belongings, placing his photo album on the bedside table, hanging his firebolt on special brackets the twins had installed, organizing his books on the small shelf Ron had contributed. It wasn't much, as personal possessions went, but seeing his things arranged in a space that was truly his filled Harry with a profound sense of belonging. That evening, after dinner, Molly announced that she had something to discuss with Harry. She led him into the living room where Arthur waited, an unusually serious expression on his normally jovial face. "Is something wrong?" Harry asked, immediately concerned. "Not at all," Molly assured him quickly. "We just wanted to talk to you about something important." "Something we should have discussed earlier," Arthur added, "but we wanted to give you time to settle in first." Harry sat down, curious now rather than worried. "What is it?" Molly and Arthur exchanged glances before Molly continued. "It's about the magical adoption that Hermione mentioned to you." "Oh," Harry said, surprised. "The ritual?" "Yes," Arthur confirmed. "We've been researching it further, and discussing it with Bill, who has some experience with ancient family magic through his curse-breaking work. We want you to know," Molly said earnestly, "that while your legal guardianship is completely settled, you'll stay with us regardless. The magical adoption would be an additional step, one that's entirely optional." "What would it mean, exactly?" Harry asked, genuinely curious. Hermione explained a bit, but... "It's an old form of magic," Arthur explained. "Predating much of our modern legal system. Essentially, it creates a magical recognition of family bonds that aren't based on blood." "It wouldn't change your identity," Molly added quickly. "You would still be Harry Potter, son of James and Lily. Your inheritance, your family name, your connection to your parents, none of that would change." "What would change, then?" Harry asked. "Magically," Arthur said, "you would be recognized as both a Potter and a Weasley. It's somewhat similar to the Bond Wards, actually, an acknowledgement of chosen family ties that exist alongside blood relations, not replacing them." "There would be some practical effects," Molly continued. "You would have certain familial rights within wizarding law that go beyond legal guardianship, inheritance considerations, next of kin status, that sort of thing." And there might be magical effects as well, Arthur added. Family magic is somewhat unpredictable. The ritual might strengthen certain abilities or affinities that are common in our family. Harry considered this information carefully. And this is something you both want? To magically adopt me? Very much so, Molly said immediately. We already consider you a son in our hearts, Harry. This would simply be a recognition of that reality in magic and law. But, Arthur emphasized, it's entirely your decision. There's no pressure, and no timeline. You can take as long as you need to consider it, or decide it's not something you want at all. The sincerity in both their faces touched Harry deeply. Once again, they were giving him a choice, treating him not as a child to be managed but as a person with agency in decisions that affected his life. What about the others? He asked after a moment. Ron and Ginny and the rest? Would they have a say? We've discussed it with them already, Molly admitted. They're all supportive, but understand that the final decision is yours. Even Percy? Harry couldn't help asking. Arthur smiled slightly. Even Percy. In fact, he was particularly interested in the legal aspects, and has been researching precedents at the ministry. The knowledge that the entire family had been consulted and supported the idea made Harry's decision easier. He had already begun to think of the Weasleys as his family. The ritual would simply affirm what he already felt in his heart. I'd like to do it, he said with quiet certainty. The adoption ritual. Molly's eyes filled with tears, though her smile was radiant. Oh, Harry, she said softly. Arthur reached over to clasp Harry's shoulder, his own eyes suspiciously bright. We're honored, he said simply. When would it happen? Harry asked, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. There are some preparations required, Arthur explained, his voice slightly rough. Bill is helping with those. But perhaps in a week or so, if that suits you. That sounds perfect, Harry agreed. We'll make the arrangements, then, Molly said, dabbing at her eyes with the corner of her apron. Oh dear, look at me getting all weepy. But I'm just so happy, Harry. So very happy. As Harry received her warm embrace, followed by Arthur's more restrained but equally heartfelt hug, he reflected that happiness was exactly what he felt too. Not the fleeting moments of joy he had experienced at Hogwarts, always shadowed by the knowledge that they were temporary, but a deeper, more permanent contentment. A sense that he had finally found where he belonged. The week leading up to the adoption ritual passed in a blur of preparations. Bill arrived to stay at the Burrow, bringing ancient texts on family magic and working closely with Arthur on the specifics of the ceremony. Percy provided legal documentation ensuring that the ritual would be properly registered with the ministry. Charlie returned from Romania, determined to be present for such a significant family event. Even Sirius and Lupin were involved, though remotely. Harry received lengthy letters from his godfather, expressing enthusiastic support for the magical adoption while reassuring him that James and Lily would have been equally approving. Your parents wanted you to be loved and happy above all else, Sirius wrote. They would be grateful, as I am, that you found a family who cherishes you as you deserve. Lupin's letter was similarly supportive, though more practical, providing Harry with historical context for the ritual and explaining its significance within wizarding culture. The day before the ceremony, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Burrow, Minerva McGonagall, looking slightly less severe than usual in summer robes of forest green rather than her usual black. Professor. Harry greeted her with surprise when Arthur escorted her into the garden where he was helping Ron and Ginny degnome the vegetable patch. I didn't expect to see you here. Mr. Potter, she acknowledged with a nod that was nearly a smile. I understand congratulations are in order. Thank you, Harry said, suddenly shy. You've heard about the adoption, then? Indeed. Albus informed the staff of your change in guardianship immediately after it was formalized. She glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard, then added in a lower voice, between ourselves, Mr. Potter, this arrangement is long overdue. Some of us have had concerns about your previous living situation for quite some time. You have? Harry asked, surprised. I observed your relatives before you were placed with them, McGonagall reminded him. My assessment was not favorable. Unfortunately, my objections were overruled by Dumbledore, Harry filled in mentally. But you're not here just to say congratulations, he guessed, noting the small package she carried. Perceptive as always, Mr. Potter, she approved. No, I've come to deliver this. She handed him the package. It's traditional for members of the adoption party to bring a small gift symbolizing the family connection being formed. Harry accepted the package with curiosity. Thank you, Professor. Should I open it now? If you wish, she permitted with a small nod. Harry carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a small, ornate wooden box. Opening it, he found a beautiful silver pin in the shape of a stag, identical to his Patronus. Professor, he breathed, lifting it carefully. This is. Your father was an exceptional student in Transfiguration, McGonagall said, a hint of pride in her voice. His animagus form was a reflection of his true nature, noble, protective, and decidedly stubborn when necessary. She paused, then added more softly, qualities I see in you as well, Mr. Potter. Harry stared at the pin, deeply moved by the gift and its significance. I don't know what to say, he admitted. No words are necessary, McGonagall assured him. It is merely a small token to remind you that while you are joining a new family tomorrow, a wonderful family, I might add, you carry your parents with you always. Thank you, Harry managed, carefully returning the pin to its box. I'll treasure it. McGonagall nodded, apparently satisfied. Well, I should greet Molly and Arthur before I return to Hogwarts. Do enjoy the remainder of your summer, Mr. Potter. I expect you to arrive for your 5th year well-rested and ready for OWL preparation. Yes, Professor, Harry promised, unable to suppress a smile at her familiar teacherly manner reasserting itself. As she headed toward the house, Harry carefully tucked the box into his pocket, oddly comforted by its presence. McGonagall's gift had addressed a concern he had barely acknowledged to himself, the fear that by embracing the Weasleys as his new family, he might somehow be betraying his parents' memory. Her gift, and the message behind it, reassured him that he wasn't replacing his parents but adding to his family's circle, just as James and Lily would have wanted. The actual day of the ritual dawned clear and bright, a perfect summer morning. Harry woke early, watching the sunlight gradually fill his new room, the enchanted stars on his ceiling fading as real daylight strengthened. Today, he thought with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation, I become officially part of the Weasley family. The ritual was scheduled for noon, to be held in the garden under the shade of the large oak tree. Bill had explained that the precise timing was significant. The sun at its zenith represented the fullness of family bonds, neither waxing nor waning but at their strongest point. The morning passed in a flurry of last-minute preparations. Molly outdid herself preparing a feast for after the ceremony, while Arthur, Bill, and Charlie established the ritual space in the garden, marking out a circle with white stones similar to those used for the bond wards. By mid-morning, guests began to arrive. Hermione came first, accompanied by her parents, who looked slightly bewildered but pleased to be included in a magical ceremony. The Grangers had brought a gift as well, a handsome leather-bound album embossed with both the Potter and Weasley names, ready to be filled with family photographs. Sirius couldn't attend in person due to his fugitive status, but he sent Remus in his stead, carrying gifts from them both, a small golden key to the Potter family vault at Gringotts for Harry to wear as a pendant, so you always remember your heritage, and a beautifully crafted wooden clock hand bearing Harry's name, ready to be added to the Weasley family clock. Even Hagrid arrived, squeezing through the garden gate with difficulty and presenting Harry with a hand-carved wooden box containing a tiny, enchanted oak sapling. Fair plantain. After the ceremony, he explained gruffly, wiping suspicious moisture from his eyes. Family tree, see? It'll grow as your bonds with the Weasleys grow. Ancient tradition, that is. As noon approached, Harry changed into new robes that Molly had insisted on purchasing for the occasion, deep green that matched his eyes, with subtle gold embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Ron, similarly attired in new blue robes, joined him in his room as he prepared. "Nervous?" Ron asked, noticing Harry's slightly shaky hands as he attempted to fasten the ceremonial clasp. "A bit," Harry admitted. "It's silly, I know. It's not like anything's really changing. I'm already living here, already part of the family." "Not silly at all," Ron countered, surprising Harry with his insight. "It's a big deal, making it official like this. Here, let me help with that." He stepped forward to assist with the troublesome clasp. "Just remember, it's not like a test you can fail or anything. The magic either recognizes the bonds that already exist, or it doesn't." And considering how strong the ward magic was. "You're right," Harry agreed, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "I'm overthinking it." "Classic Hermione move, that," Ron teased. "Don't tell her I said so, though." Harry laughed, grateful for Ron's ability to lighten the moment. "Your secret's safe with me." A soft knock at the door preceded Ginny's entrance. She wore dress robes of pale gold, her red hair arranged in an intricate braid interwoven with small white flowers. "It's time," she announced. "Everyone's ready in the garden." Harry nodded, straightening his robes one final time. "How do I look?" he asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Like a Potter about to become a Weasley," Ginny replied with a warm smile. "Which is to say, perfect." Together, the three of them descended to the garden, where indeed everyone was gathered around the ritual circle. Arthur and Molly stood at its center, both dressed in formal robes of deep blue. The other Weasley children formed a semicircle behind them, with guests arranged in a wider circle beyond. As Harry approached, a hush fell over the gathering. Bill stepped forward to meet him at the edge of the circle. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Harry nodded, surprised to find that his nervousness had vanished, replaced by a sense of rightness, of coming home in the truest sense. "Then let's begin," Bill said, guiding Harry to stand before Arthur and Molly at the circle's center. The ritual itself was both simpler and more profound than Harry had anticipated. Bill, as the eldest son and a practiced worker of ancient magic, served as the ceremony master. He began by casting a circle of golden light that rose from the white stones to form a dome over the participants, reminiscent of the bond wards but more concentrated. "We gather today," he intoned, his voice carrying easily in the hushed garden, "to witness and celebrate the expansion of our family through the ancient rite of magical adoption. Arthur and Molly Weasley seek to welcome Harry James Potter as a son in magic as well as in heart, creating bonds that magic itself will recognize and honor." He turned to Arthur and Molly. "Do you, Arthur and Molly, freely offer your family name, your protection, and your love to Harry James Potter, to be from this day forward a son to you in all ways save blood?" "We do," they replied in unison, their voices steady and sure. Bill turned to Harry. "And do you, Harry James Potter, freely accept this offer, choosing to join the Weasley family while honoring the Potter legacy you carry?" "I do," Harry said, his voice clearer and stronger than he had expected. "Then let the magic witness and affirm these bonds," Bill declared. What followed was a series of simple but meaningful exchanges. Arthur and Molly each placed a hand on Harry's shoulders while reciting a brief pledge to nurture, protect, and guide him as their son. Harry, in turn, placed his hands over theirs and pledged his respect, loyalty, and love as their chosen son. Then, one by one, each Weasley child approached to welcome Harry in their own way. Bill, as the eldest, presented him with a small signet ring bearing the Weasley family crest. Charlie gave him a dragon-scale amulet for protection. Percy, surprisingly emotional, offered a formal scroll detailing Harry's new legal status within the wizarding world. Fred and George, true to form, presented him with a small, mysterious box that they promised will come in handy when you need a laugh or an escape, essential survival tools in this family. Ron gave him a chess piece, a knight, carved from the same wood as the Weasley family chess set. And Ginny, last of all, placed around his neck a simple silver chain from which hung a small amber stone. "For courage," she said softly. "Though you've never lacked for that." With the gifts exchanged, Bill directed everyone to join hands, forming an unbroken circle with Harry, Arthur, and Molly at its center. He began an incantation in an ancient magical language, the words flowing like music. As he spoke, the golden light of the ritual circle intensified, spiraling inward toward the center where Harry stood with his new parents. Unlike the bond wards, which had surrounded Harry with separate strands of light from each participant, this magic enveloped the three of them together in a single golden cocoon that pulsed with warmth and life. Harry felt something shift within him, not a dramatic change, but a settling, as though puzzle pieces that had been slightly askew were finally sliding into their proper places. He could sense, in a way that defied explanation, his connection to each person in the circle, strongest with Arthur and Molly but extending to all the Weasleys and even, to a lesser degree, to the witnesses beyond. The cocoon of light grew blindingly bright for a brief moment, then shattered into thousands of golden sparks that rained down upon everyone present before fading away. In the hushed aftermath, Bill's voice rang out clear and formal, "It is done. Magic has witnessed and blessed this adoption. Harry James Potter is now also Harry James Potter Weasley, son of this house and this family by choice and by magic." A cheer erupted from the gathered witnesses, breaking the ceremonial solemnity. Harry found himself engulfed in Molly's fierce embrace, then Arthur's, then passed from one Weasley to another in a whirlwind of hugs, backslaps, and in the twins' case, a slightly too enthusiastic lifting and spinning that left him dizzy. All right, Molly finally intervened, rescuing Harry from his enthusiastic new brothers. "Give him some air, for goodness sake. There's plenty of time for all that, a lifetime, in fact. A lifetime." The simple phrase struck Harry with its profound promise. A lifetime of belonging, of family dinners and holiday celebrations, of having people who cared where he was and what happened to him. A lifetime of being Harry Potter Weasley, honoring the parents who had given him life while embracing the family who had given him a home. The celebratory feast that followed was joyous and chaotic in equal measure, spilling from the garden into the house as afternoon turned to evening. Harry moved through it in a happy daze, accepting congratulations, sharing laughs, savoring the simple reality of being surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him. As twilight settled over the Burrow, Hagrid led everyone back to the garden for the planting of the family tree sapling. In a small ceremony of its own, Harry and the Weasleys each added a handful of soil to the planting, with Hagrid pronouncing ancient words of blessing for growth and longevity. "There," Hagrid said with satisfaction as the last of the soil was patted into place. "It'll grow strong and straight, just you watch. Magical oaks like this one can live for centuries, they can." "Centuries?" Harry repeated, oddly moved by the thought of this small sapling outliving all of them, a lasting testament to the family bonds formed this day. "Course," Hagrid confirmed. "That's why it's traditional, see? Family lines continue even when individuals pass on. This tree'll still be standin' long after we're gone, a livin' symbol of what happened here today." As the celebration continued around him, Harry found a quiet moment to slip away to his room, needing a brief respite from the joyful chaos. He stood at the window, looking out over the garden where magical lanterns now illuminated the ongoing festivities, the newly planted sapling protected by a small golden dome of its own. A soft knock at his door preceded Ginny's entrance. "Everyone's wondering where you disappeared to," she said, though her tone was understanding rather than accusatory. "Just needed a moment," Harry explained. "It's all a bit overwhelming." "In a good way," he hastened to add. Ginny nodded, coming to join him at the window. "It's a lot to take in," she agreed. "Going from being Harry Potter to being Harry Potter Weasley. I can still hardly believe it," he admitted. "That your parents would want, that all of you would accept. Why wouldn't we?" Ginny asked simply. "You've been part of this family since Ron sat in your compartment on the Hogwarts Express. Today just made it official." Harry smiled at her straightforward assessment. "I suppose you're right. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the celebration below. Then Ginny spoke again, her voice soft but sure. "You know, when I was little, I used to dream about Harry Potter, the boy who lived from the storybooks. He was this perfect, heroic figure who could do no wrong." She glanced at him, a wry smile playing at her lips. "Then I met the real Harry Potter, and eventually I realized he was better than the storybook version, braver, kinder, but also human. Flawed. Real." She turned to face him fully. "And now that real Harry is my brother, officially. It's strange how life works out, isn't it?" "Very strange," Harry agreed, touched by her words. "But I'm glad it worked out this way." "Me too," Ginny said simply. She bumped her shoulder against his companionably. "Now come back downstairs before Fred and George organize a search party. They've been working on some new fireworks they're dying to show off, and they won't start without you." Harry followed her back to the garden, where indeed Fred and George were preparing an elaborate fireworks display to cap the evening's celebrations. As colorful explosions illuminated the night sky, spelling out, "Welcome home Harry," in sparkling letters, he found himself surrounded by his new family, Molly's arm around his waist, Arthur's hand on his shoulder, the others gathered close around them. Home, Harry thought, watching the magical display. That's what today was really about. Not just the ritual, not just the legal change in status, but the recognition of a simple truth: he had found his home at last. As the final fireworks faded from the sky, leaving only stars in their wake, Harry glanced around at the faces illuminated by the garden lanterns, the Weasleys, Hermione and her parents, Hagrid, Lupin, and all the others who had come to witness and celebrate this day. His family, both by blood and by choice. For so long, he had defined himself by what he had lost: his parents, a normal childhood, the chance to grow up loved and wanted. Now, standing in this garden surrounded by people who had chosen him just as he had chosen them, he realized he could finally define himself by what he had found instead. Harry Potter Weasley. Son of James and Lily Potter, son of Arthur and Molly Weasley. No longer the boy who lived in a cupboard under the stairs, no longer the unwanted burden, no longer alone. The Dursleys would never see morning at Privet Drive again, and neither would he. Instead, he would see his mornings here at the Burrow, and at Hogwarts, and wherever else life might take him, secure in the knowledge that he always had a home to return to, a family who would welcome him with open arms. It was, Harry reflected as the celebration continued around him, everything he had ever wanted, and so much more than he had ever dared to hope for. A new dawn, indeed, not just for a single day but for the rest of his life. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.